of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, give me 1 second here. We did not have a closed session this evening, so we don't have any closed session announcements. Approval of the agenda. I would like, if you all have a copy of the agenda in front of you, or you can see it on your laptop. I want to reorganize the agenda a little bit. So what we're going to do, what I would like to do is take the discussion action items first before the staff reports. And within the discussion action items, I want to move item C, which is the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee Annual Report, to A. So it'll be the first one in the discussion action items. And then following that will be the contract for the lights, and then the develop the new options for relocation of the food and nutritional services. That report will come after that. And then we'll continue to do the consent first and all of that. And then after the discussion actions, we'll move right into all those staff reports that we have listed. Then following the staff reports, the public hearing, and we'll end with the public hearing. All right, thank you. We have first by Trustee Miller and a second by Trustee Scott for the revised agenda for this evening. All in favor? 7-0. Okay, and I don't have any comments for consent or nothing right now for any item on the agenda. So approval of the consent. Anybody would like to pull anything? Okay.
I move approval of consent.
All right.
I second.
First by Trustee Cooper, second by Trustee Aguila. All in favor for approval of the consent agenda, 7-0. And any announcements, Trustee Miller? We're on to announcements. Okay. Trustee, no? No. Okay. Trustee Aguila? Trustee Mack? Okay. Trustee Cooper? Trustee Scott?
Well, I went to the graduations at Novato High and San Marin, as did many of my fellow trustees,
Yeah,
even though they're not commenting
out.
on it. They were there, I promise.
Summer vacation.
Yeah. They were well attended. They were just awesome. And congratulations to all the graduates.
Yeah, I did as well attend some graduations. Today I was able to go to the adult education graduation, which was about 12, I think, students, 10, 12 students. Over at the Hill Education Center in the library. That was this afternoon, and that was done very nicely. Karen Valentine did a great job doing that. And then I also did a tour today at the North Marin Community Services, which is the previous was the Nevada Human Needs facility over there. Cheryl Paddock we met with, Leslie was there, and Chris was there, and we got a little tour. They were having the food bank was there, and so people were coming to get their food and things like that. So we were able to sit down and have a little conversation. And it was nice. So we did that. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. And then that was it. Any announcements? We don't have equivalent? Yes.
We used our campuses for early morning food distribution and food bank.
Yeah.
What do we do over the summer?
Some of them stay open. Some of them don't. I think it depends on the school if they have the volunteers to carry it over. Am I correct, Leslie? Does that sound about right? Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So the big news was that we just heard was that Justin Morey will become the principal at Sonoma High School, which is a great job for him. He came from Terra Linda, so he has high school experience, and it's close to his home, and I think they need him, so congratulations to him. And Chris will kick in a process for replacing him. We have interviews for the Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services tomorrow. We have Assistant Principal MSA at Novato High on Thursday. We have trainings going on. Project-based learning training was yesterday and today. The technology training for the teachers using the Chromebooks. The math training also went on and will go on tomorrow as well. A team of us, Mark Sims and Matt Baldwin, myself, Cindy Klinkman, and Jen Larson went up to Davis for the Cali math training today. So that's the 3-year group that we're in that's been doing a lot of the planning, talked about learning targets and a lot of good math stuff. So that was a nice end of the year event. And then the last week, yeah, went really smooth. So thanks for going to all the graduations, but everything was under control, and we like that. So congratulations to our graduates who are moving on, and that was last week. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Non-agenda public comment, I don't have anything, so let's move right in. Remember, we reorged, and we don't see Diane here yet. So we're gonna start off with the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee. So I don't see her yet. So let's move on to, what it was 14A would be now 14B, the approval award contract of the construction for the San Marin High School lighting. And Mike's ready to go, so thank you for being available for us to do the agenda.
My pleasure.
We had moved that up because the reason why we moved the parcel tax up is because we thought this is a community member, a parent, that we didn't want her to be here at 9:50 at night.
Excuse me. Good evening, trustees. So here before you to seek approval to award a contract to BHM Construction Incorporated for the San Marin High School Stadium Lights and Public Address System project. Just a little background. Board approved the EIR spring last year for the lights and the PA system. And also, at the time, approved a 50-50 funding split on the lights with the San Marin Sports Boosters. At the time was estimated approximately $600,000. And then recently on April 24th of this year, you approved us to do public bidding for the project and updated our budget that same time. And then on May 24th, we had a bid opening and received 2 official bids for the project. And the lowest responsible qualified bidder was BHM Construction Incorporated with a construction bid of $1,196,700. And we have a recommendation letter that was in the package, your package from Greystone, validating that. And superintendent staff recommend that the board approve the award of the contract to BHM Construction for the stadium lights and public address system. It is a split fund between Fund 21, which is for the stadium lights, and Fund 22, which is for the public address system. And again, it is contingent upon the $600,000 donation from the San Marin Sports Boosters. We thought we would have that agreement signed on hand tonight. They're currently discussing it as we speak, but we do not have that binding agreement as of yet. But I do have some updated information on that I'd like to share with you. Right now, the Sports Boosters have raised $470,000 in cash, about 75%. They have another $60,000 in pledges, so about 10% of the $600,000. So they have a total of about $500,000 earmarked, and they need another $70,000 to get to that $600,000 level, and they're working hard on that. And they do know it's in the draft agreement that this project is relying upon that $600,000 donation to go forward with this. So based on that, we are seeking your approval to award the construction contract in the amount of $1,196,700 to BHM Construction, and more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Trustee Mack.
Just want to tell everybody thank you to BHM for really stepping up. And that quote is amazingly different than the other quote.
Yes, it was.
I want to say thank you to the folks behind that. So saving us what appears to be about $1 million. So with that said,
okay.
I'd like to move we approve.
Is there a reason that there's $1 million difference there? It makes you sort of go,
industry will say that, obviously BHM came in, I think, under our budget, which was great. The other company, I think it was indicative of the ability they had to do the work. So sometimes they'll say, well, I can do it if you give me this price. So it's more indicative of their workload than trying to gouge us for money.
Okay. All right. Trustee Miller, did you have a question? No second yet. Okay, Trustee Nell's a second. Okay.
So what happens if we don't
Mike.
have this money in hand, it's
Mike.
not turned over to us?
Can you speak into the mic, Ross? Sorry. Trustee Miller, please.
So not a penny of this has been moved into the district's account. So where do we stand? If we award this contract, we're on the hook for the whole thing. My sense is more likely scenario is they'll transfer the funds they have to us, and then we'll be at risk for $100,000. I don't mind being at risk for $100,000, but I'm uncomfortable being at risk for the whole contribution. So I'd like to say we'll approve it tonight, but contingent upon the funds they have in hand transferred to our account.
Okay.
That way our risk is small.
Okay. So we have a suggestion at the table here to amend the motion. Or is that what you're asking, Trustee Miller, to amend the
I'm
motion?
asking for a
think we need some
consensus of if we
Or
should do that.
clarification on where that money, isn't it in a trust account?
Well, not a trust account, we control, right? Yeah.
Well, I think there might be some binding on it, I don't know.
I'm not sure the actual agreement. I haven't.
So I would
seen
like
the
to
lease.
amend the motion to approve it subject to receipt of the $470,000 irrevocably.
Does the maker of the motion?
I'll accept that.
Okay, accept that.
So the amount that they have in cash right now?
Yeah, I'm willing to risk
Yeah.
100,000, I'm just not willing to risk the half a million.
It doesn't change, right, the equation, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't have any, I'm sure they're gonna keep working at it, but
Yeah.
All right, so we have the first by Trustee
I
Miller.
have a question.
Okay,
Or did you have a quick, you go first.
No, I'm done.
Derek, you're up.
go Derek.
No, I'm fine with an amendment, but I do want to know the impact one way or the other. We're scheduled, where are we in the schedule? So like, any decision we make,
Well, according to the EIR, we are not starting construction until after September 1st, which is the end of the nesting bird season. That was one of the stipulations we had in our EIR. So even though we award the contract, now we won't start construction per the defined verbiage in the EIR until September 1st. So we have a little time.
how does it work with a contractor like this as far as awarding a contract tentatively? I mean, they have to book time, right? I mean,
We did reach out
we
to
need to
the
make a commitment here.
contractor and asked, and they agreed to keep the same price through the slight delay in the construction. They understood. I think that's part of the reason we got a,
So they're working with us on the funding commitment as well somehow? All right. And then my last question, just about the separating the PA system from the lights.
yes.
Is that even possible, or?
It's just a funding evolution. Basically, the portion of the public address system, which we're finalizing the numbers now.
Yeah,
will be
without knowing
funded.
what you could or couldn't do first at this point, but that aspect of the project wouldn't be held up by the amended proposal.
Well, actually,
Amended motion, I guess.
we're taking a conservative approach because you get into the cumulative effect, environmental impacts on the location. So for instance, the press box is not part of this project, but is going on in conjunction with this. We're trying to hold all of those until September 1st, so we don't have any opportunity or any chance of violating our EIR.
Okay, so then I'm seconding a motion that approves the awarding of the contract pending receipt of a dollar amount no less than $100,000 than the original commitment. Am I spelling that out clearly enough?
What I said
No,
is the
470.
470, the numbers they said they had.
Cash on hand.
I took them at their word.
So
So I like precise numbers.
So technically, that's where I was headed, so you offered up 100, but if the number's no less than 130,000, that's probably better. So, I'm just trying to make it official, so that we,
Yeah. The 475, which is what, right?
Four-
475.
470 in cash.
70, I
And
apologize.
$60 in pledges, which they
Right.
haven't received in hand yet.
so I guess the awarding of the contract is based on us receiving $170,000.
No. 400.
Didn't I say that? I meant to say $470,000. Did I say 400 or something like that?
Yeah,
Wait, so, want me to start over?
yeah, reiterate your motion.
Let me just get clarity on where okay. So there is $470,000 they have on hand,
In cash, correct.
correct. There is $60,000 in commitments.
Donations, correct.
So
They're,
it gets them to 530,
right,
then they have another 70 to raise.
correct.
Got it. My motion is that we approve the awarding of the contract pending receipt of the $470,000 into our fund whatever, what,
Into
21?
our own bank account,
Well,
whatever.
Help me here, guys.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, we have to have the control of the money.
Okay, so that's a looser way of saying it. That it
Yeah, you
could
can
be that
tighten
we have a
it up.
legal document that says that it's,
No, in our,
okay, right, that's where I'm going. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so that pending deposit of $470,000 into, which fund is it, 21 or 22?
This would be 21.
21, into Fund 21.
Okay,
Fair enough?
yeah, that makes sense.
I will second that motion.
Okay, and we have a second by trustee Nell. All in favor? Okay, 7-0.
Thank you very much. And we'll provide an update on the binding agreement in the weekly and
Yeah.
possibly bring an update if we need to at the
Right,
next
at
week's
the
board
next
meeting.
meeting, yeah. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, are we ready to go? Yeah. Okay, she's ready. Okay. Yep, so we'll go back to the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, and I'll turn it to Jim Hogaboom, and Diane Gasson is here. Hi, Diane. Thank you for moving this up and being here. We didn't want you to be here till all hours.
I get up at 5, so
Yeah,
if it
you.
was later, it would have been really interesting.
Well, I think as the board is aware by now, Yancey Hawken, our CBO, was ill, so he's not able to be here tonight. So we certainly appreciate Diane stepping up. And Diane's been a big advocate for the district and is also helping us to make sure that we're careful with our budgets and oversees those and gives us a lot of great input and helps us. So she's on the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee. So we asked her to come and say a few words about the annual report. Thank you.
Does it matter?
You can bend it down. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hello. Again, thank you for adjusting the time. That worked out really well. As was said, I'm one of the members of the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, and the responsibility of the committee is to ensure that special tax proceeds are spent for their authorized purposes and to report annually to the board and the public regarding the expenditure of such funds. So the report, which I believe you should have in front of you, is for the 2016-2017 fiscal year. And as you'll see, the $4,167,402 in revenue was spent in the areas of athletics, which was 13%, libraries, 14%, music and performing arts, 17%, secondary counseling, 20%, and the largest contribution of 35% of the funds goes to attracting and retaining teachers. All of these elements are provided for within the parcel tax language. So, any question?
How is the committee, the board, the committee itself? Do you have enough members or?
We just recruited several. So it's been, the biggest challenge is finding a convenient time for everyone to attend.
Okay.
But we have several new people joining in the next
Perfect.
year.
Okay.
And I will be remaining for one more year.
Thank you. Thank
No.
you for doing that. Okay, questions from the board? Or comment, just anything? Yeah.
Well,
Trustee Nell.
I just want to express gratitude for the service. I appreciate, as you just mentioned, it's hard for civilians to find the time and get together, and it's a lot of work. You have to concentrate on the numbers, but we appreciate what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Has this looks like it would have been mailed. Was this mailed out at all, or?
It's my understanding that I think you were to look at it first, and then it would be mailed.
Okay.
So it's the expectation that if everything looks good, that
All right.
it'll be presented as
And I
is.
think one was developed for the oversight committee for the bond as well. One of these mailers.
Right.
It
And
was, and I don't know if that one was mailed or not, but maybe a combination of the two would be nice, maybe.
We've talked actually about that because there is some misunderstanding for what each of them can
Yeah.
pay for.
Yeah.
And so we actually at a recent meeting talked about how it would be nice to have a piece that reflects, okay, this is what the bond pays for, and this is what
Yes.
parcel tax
That would be
pays
nice.
for.
So, you'll check with, okay. And that, yeah, obviously should get mailed to all homeowners here,
Yes.
everybody in Novato, so.
That's my
It
understanding.
needs to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, nobody else, so this is,
Thank you.
hold on. This is a discussion action item. This is, the superintendent staff recommendation is the board accepts the 16-17 annual report from the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee.
I'll move.
Okay, so we have a first by trustee Scott. Second by trustee Cooper. All in favor? 7-0. Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Diane, very much. Appreciate that. Yeah. See, that wasn't so hard. That was easy. All right, we'll continue on with our discussion action items. This is the last one in that item. This is approval to develop new options for relocation of food and nutritional services, otherwise known as FANS, central warehouse to existing maintenance, operations, and transportation warehouse. I am going to recuse myself from this item because part of it is relocating or relocating two things, but building something potentially near my home. So Shelley's going to take over for this item, and I'll be back.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. All right, and we're going to have Mike Woolward present. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm used to going at like 9 o'clock at night, so this early thing is really taking me for a turn. But good evening again, trustees. As mentioned here, to seek approval to develop a new option for the relocation of our FANS Central Warehouse. Just a little background, this board approved the Linwood site renovation project as a phase 1 project, and part of that was this piece. Was identified as that. However, we didn't have a dollar figure tied to that particular piece of the project. But in order for us to proceed with any other work at Linwood, we need to do this piece first, which is why we're coming to you with this now. We also previously, with your approval, hired Bollinger, Larry Bollinger, and his food service as a food service consultant. He went out and looked at all of our local FANS kitchens and sites at all of our schools, and also looked at the central program we have and gave us some recommendations on what a new central warehouse would look like, and also some recommendations on where it could go. We dove into 2 of those and started developing those options, and as we looked into it, we came up with a 3rd option, which is what I'd like to explain more in detail tonight and get your approval to pursue that option into schematic design, but I will go over all 3 options. So, but before I jump into the PowerPoint, as much as I love PowerPoint, I did want to let you know that unfortunately Miguel, our FANS director, couldn't be here tonight. Has been very active and involved in this process, and he actually wrote a letter. If you don't mind, I'd like to just read it real quick. It's a pretty short letter. Just says, I'd like to express my approval and complete support for the recommendation to locate and construct the new FANS Central Distribution Warehouse at the existing MOT warehouse, which is the new option I will present to you. Guess I should have read this after. The location is ideal on many levels because it keeps us in centrally positioned in town, provides us access to vendor and to our delivery vehicles, and there's plenty of space for dry storage, refrigeration, offices, and parking. We've been discussing the building of a new FANS Central Distribution Warehouse since I began working for NUSD in 2002. I'm glad to see that it is finally coming to fruition. I look forward to further collaborating with staff, consultants, and architects in the design and construction of the FANS Central Distribution Warehouse. Thank you, Miguel. So he's enjoying himself, I believe, in sunny southern Italy right now, but he's with us in spirit. Yeah, tough. Oops. Okay, so real quick, give you the little visual background and get into the 3 options. Specifically, it's locate the central warehouse at San Marin High School behind their newer kitchen that was built just a few years ago. The other option was at the Hill campus on the basketball courts, and I'll show you that in more detail. And then, of course, the non-school site option, which is moving FANS to the MOT warehouse. And again, it triggers a domino effect, which I'll go into all the pieces of what has to move where to make that possible. Correct. Olive Street Warehouse. Thank you. So then I'll go through sort of the domino impacts on that option, and then at the end, show you the summary of options again for a comparison, and then give you our recommendation. Oh my gosh, this is not working. Okay, just quick background. Existing one is located on FANS. I'm sure everybody's been out there. It's sort of a cobbled together, interesting buildings that's broached into the back parking lot. It's not a great place. It has undersized refrigeration and dry storage. We have split storage in our Olive MOT warehouse right now with another refrigeration and freezer unit at there at Wells, so we kind of have double the equipment to meet the storage needs. The benefit of consolidating our FANS facility to a central location, again, we reduce the bulk storage from the multiple locations, and we get ourselves down to newer single bulk freezers and refrigerators, and we increase a lot of operational efficiency. We have people all over the place right now. They make it work, but it's pretty inefficient. And again, this was part of Linwood's overall project, but did not have a specific cost estimate in the facilities master plan. It was identified as a need, but did not have an estimate. Give you a little overview, eye in the sky look from Novato. Just visually, these are where the 3 locations are on the map. So San Marin is probably the furthest away, kind of in the northwest side of town. MOT Warehouse at Olive is right next to 101 there in the upper or the mid right, and then Hill Campus really is central in town, but it's in the middle of a pretty dense neighborhood. So driving down to San Marin option, the green rectangle is where we would locate it. It's right behind. If you see the little bump out in the back of the white roofed building there, that's the new kitchen part, and we would put it on the back side there. We would do a little paving and concrete work to give you access off the already existing entrance off of South Nevada Boulevard to get to that. Just a close-up view with a quick sketch of what we'd have to add to, if you can imagine a semi-tractor trailer truck pulling in, it'd have to do a pretty good 3-point turn to back in, offload, and then drive out. Just summary of this option, cost estimates just a little under $3 million, about $2.9 million. And this is the central facility that Larry Bollinger's report recommended. It's about a 5,000 square foot facility. It identified the amount of high bulk storage, the bulk cooler and bulk refrigerator, some office space, circulation space, and some other storage options as well. This option, it does keep the fans program on a school site, which we're trying to get some of the support services off of school sites. On the plus, it's accessible to main roads, South Nevada Boulevard and San Marin Drive, which easy access to 101. It's about 0.15 miles from the closest housing, which happens to be the one behind the softball field, the newer neighborhood that's a little bit north down South Nevada Boulevard. And it's also adjacent to the new kitchen, so there's some efficiencies there as well. Moving to the Hill Campus option, the green rectangle is in the middle of the basketball courts. Right there on the back side of the Hill Campus. And this would be a little more interesting to develop because we'd have to use an existing entrance that's off of Diablo Avenue to get in there. And you can imagine a tractor trailer truck, the room they need to get around. So we'd have to do a lot more work to get clearance to get access to that location. Close-up view, you see a little more of the road and approach that's needed. And then the building would be in the back with a space back there. This is a bit concerning for a couple reasons I'll go over in just a second. A little more expensive, again, because of the access we need to do, about $3.5 million. Again, the same 5,000 square foot warehouse. It does, again, keep fans on a school site. This one has a lot more limited access. Diablo and I think it's Hill Road aren't exactly big main arteries in town. They both go through neighborhoods, and big concern there, having that truck traffic and housing. It's also only 250 feet from the closest housing area, and there's some apartments over there as well as single-family housing, so it's a lot. This would require us to do a little more deep dive into the CEQA process for impacts, noise, and those kinds of things. So going to the third option, this is the Olive Warehouse, rectangular. That's the commonly referred to as the MOT yard. We park the buses, we have maintenance operations and our transportation folks out there. And in this case, we would take about 2/3 of the warehouse, which currently is houses maintenance and operations, and we would relocate them to another location. I'll explain in just a second. Transportation would remain because of the gas and the parking required for the buses. That'd be hard to replicate and find a location for that. But we have more than enough room to put renovate that existing part of the warehouse to get that 5,000 square foot layout you just saw. What did I do? Oh, so this is a visual of where would the maintenance and operations folks go. This is a close-up or an eye view of C Street. And you can see off of C Street in the yellow highlighted area, that's sort of at the edge of the property, is where we would put a 10,800 square foot warehouse for maintenance operations. And we also have the ability to move grounds off of Nevada High School and combine all three operations into one warehouse. And just give you, we did a little work on the renderings. That's basically a Butler building with some access doors for the storage for all the equipment and some paved area for parking of the vehicles. And just a aerial view. So this option is about $5.4 million. Again, you get the fans, at the Olive Warehouse, and then you get MOT at this new warehouse as well. You get everything off of school sites. Support services that are currently on school sites, you get them off of school sites. We also get to follow our plan that we applied to with the federal government for the land deeded to us on C Street. Part of that was to put this operation on there, so we're sort of following our plan. We're actually putting a physical plant on that property, which is a good thing. The Department of Education's been closely monitoring us and how we're doing on our plans.
Mike, is this,
Yes.
Does this cost $5.3 million include purchase of the Butler building, and it's a turnkey, so
It's all inclusive.
all of this is included?
Gets the 10,800 square foot warehouse on C Street, and it renovates the Olive portion of the warehouse to put fans in
Okay.
there. And some impacts, again, that domino thing, I was explaining, it does remove fans and grounds from school sites. That's a plus. We do get a new consolidated building. If you've been to the grounds building at Novato High, it literally has a river running through it in the middle of winter, and it's old and worn out and desperate need of repair. So we consolidate all the maintenance functions into one single place, which is a lot of efficiencies on their part. Again, it meets the Department of Ed's requirements for the property use, and we are following our plan as we've submitted. And I also wanted to highlight that in the facilities master plan, we had designated $1.9 million as a C Street development, just a general descriptor for that project. So if you kind of count that as a credit or something we need to do anyway by the master plan, then this project would be about $3.5 million and in line with the option we had at Hill. So just a summary of what I just explained. Least expensive option, San Marin, some pluses and minuses. Next would be Hill Campus. Again, it's centrally located, but has a few more negatives because of close proximity to housing, and it's not on any main roads. And it would have some little deeper dive for the CEQA. And of course, the MOT warehouse option at Olive, which gets us a lot of efficiencies, gets our support services off of school sites, gets us moving ahead with our plan to develop the property on C Street with the Department of Education. And we get all those efficiencies from combining things together. So with that, the staff would like to recommend approval to develop this option into the schematic design, which we'd bring at the next board meeting. But it's to specifically construct a 10,800 square foot new warehouse on C Street to relocate maintenance and operations from the Olive warehouse to this new warehouse on C Street, move grounds from Novato High School into that new warehouse on C Street, and then move fans, and then renovate the Olive warehouse, then move fans from Linwood into the Olive warehouse, and then demo the facilities at Linwood, and we can start looking into developing those next projects for Linwood, and then demo the grounds building at Novato High School. Because as you remember, when you approved the schematic design for the Center for the Sciences building at Novato High, it was on part of the grounds property, and we needed to move it. So that is the presentation, and happy to entertain any questions.
So you're ready for some questions. Okay,
sure.
so we're going to go Trustee Mack, Trustee Milrick, and then Trustee Aguila, and then Trustee Nell, and then Trustee Cooper.
Party.
All right, there we go.
Two questions. The first one, just educate me on why only option 2, or why option 2 requires a CEQA and the other ones don't.
Well, it doesn't, I mean, they all would, we would look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to confuse anybody. We would all do the CEQA process, which for most projects, it could be an exemption, legislative exemption, or categorical exemption. We would go through that process. For that project, much like what we did with the lights, you had to go into a more detailed review because of the environmental impacts. Noise, close proximity to housing
250
raises
Okay.
more issues. So we would do that as part of the project normally,
Okay.
but the other locations, because of where they at and further away they are from housing, we might not have to do as much.
So really distant from the housing for the most part.
In a
is the
general
main
sense,
one.
but
Okay.
I didn't mean to indicate we would not do CEQA for the others. We would do it for everyone, but This option, we feel, would require a much more
Okay.
in-depth look under the secret process.
Then my second question revolves around timing. Do all three options kind of have the same kind of timeline in terms of, number one, getting grounds off of Novato High? Obviously, that's important to me. And number two, getting fans off of Linwood as well.
Right. Well, timing-wise, because we're not building an educational facility on a school site, we don't have to go to DSA for that warehouse on C Street. And we could start that as soon as we get through the detailed design and get the project out in the street and bid out. We could, and you're talking a pretty standard, I call it a Butler building, but it's there's pretty standard buildings that they do this all the time. So I think we'd have a shorter timeline to get that done. And obviously that's the first piece. Once you build that, then you can start moving other pieces off. Timing-wise, we'd hope to get it done so that when we start construction on the Center for the Sciences building, the grounds is already gone, and they can just demo that as part of that project.
So really, are we talking, what, next summer? Okay.
Again, with the
That-
and
And that only applies for option three.
correct. Putting sites at Hill or at San Marin would require us to go through DSA, and they have a little bit longer review process. And
Okay.
I don't mean we're not circumventing. We'd be following different codes than.
Well, I mean, I guess the point I'd like to articulate is that option three has a plan for maintenance and operations.
Correct.
Options 1 and 2 do not.
Correct.
They just have 1.9
It's just
million
for
lying
fans.
around with a placeholder, what we're gonna do someday. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Milrick?
So can you go to bring up the slide, not that one, the one that shows
Ariel?
Hamilton area?
And
No, one more.
Oh, C Street.
This one.
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna walk over so everybody can see.
Is there any way you can speak into the mic, Ross?
I'm gonna try, so here's what I want you to see. Here's the creek,
Yes.
here's the creek following here, here's the swale, and the creek comes by Hamilton School here, these trees.
Right.
So the creek path goes like that, under the building and like that. So the important point of that is that creek is designed to flow underground through, I think, 3 36-inch conduits. But if the creek overflows, if those conduits are not adequate, the actual surface of the ground has a gully dug right through a swale that goes all the way through Lanham Village and underneath the building we're proposing building. So we put the building right where it's shown. We have basically blocked a riparian right-of-way. And if we create flooding in Hamilton, in Lanham Village, because we block the natural flow of a creek, we have an issue. So this needs to be part of the design of how we do this. Maybe you turn the building 90 degrees and get it out of that right-of-way. I think there's some solutions, but it is something that Stuberstroh, or one of the civil engineers in town, is well aware of this architecture and strategy. And it may not be cheap. My guess is it's not going to be cheap, unless you can find some trick, maybe. Sure. But we just have a great picture. I wanted to show it. You can, I mean, literally, just look where the trees are. Here's Hamilton. There's a gate here, so they can clear debris out of the creek. It goes underground here, and then it'll overflow here if it has to, and come right through this parking lot.
Interesting.
Isn't that where the exchange building was?
Yes, it's in the.
Correct.
Exact same location.
Yeah, this wall right here is the loading dock of the exchange. The culverts are underneath this parking lot right here. You can go out and pull the manhole cover up and look for yourself. They're down about 10 feet.
Okay, guys, we need to be on the mic. Okay, thank you, Trustee Milrick.
Thank you. That's great information. We'll definitely look into that and get more details.
Okay.
Just so the board knows, we do have the flexibility. It's a pretty big piece of property, and as you notice with the drawings, we had pretty big parking lots. So the building, like you mentioned, Trustee Miller, we could rotate 90 degrees, and maybe the parking lot would be closest to that drainage.
As long as you're aware of the issue, I'm sure you can design where.
Thank you for bringing that up. Really appreciate that.
Okay, Trustee Aguila?
Yeah, so you're presenting us with 3 options.
Correct.
And you know, the San Marin High School obviously is the cheaper one, and we're like telling the community we don't have much money, and how are you, financially speaking, I mean, what would be your second option? Your second recommendation?
I think all things considered, the second option would be San Marin. Because it requires the least amount of work on the campus to put the building there.
And that is a possibility as well. I mean, we can work all the issues that come up and.
Sure, and I'm not trying, please, hopefully I didn't confuse me. I'm not trying to paint a picture that only this option is the only one you can do. We can do all three. It's just looking at it from a holistic view and taking everything into account, you know, the engineering, the efficiencies, the Department of Education requirements, a lot of issues we've had outstanding. This was a way to kind of connect some of those and resolve a lot of issues with seemingly one project.
So the San Marin would be your second option and is the cheapest one? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Trustee Nell?
Had a few of my questions answered. Just when I look at the outline of the two proposed, the hillside and the San Marin High School site, you got a square and a schematic and 5,000 square feet inside. The shape of the old maintenance building on Olive isn't, I just didn't hear you say whether that was the same amount of square feet or.
There's probably a little more room because it's a sort of a trapezoidal shape, not a perfect rectangle. We would obviously do some renovation and pretty much gut that into the warehouse back down to the walls and then build it up. It would have a little more height than I think a new building we would build that's already in there because it's a pretty tall warehouse. Okay, so we have a little more vertical storage that we could take advantage of. But roughly, I think it's square footage wise, it's pretty close.
Really kind of depends on the split that we have, but we could go up to 6,000 feet or more in there. It's highly inefficient the way that it's currently devised, and we could definitely improve.
All right, so there's plenty of space for both to remain, and
correct. You
guys are going to work that out, and it'd just be reconfigured from what you're, this example that we have an example that we're looking at. Would you characterize this rectangle and the rectangle for San Marin as sort of, is that an example of how it would?
It basically would be this layout, which is roughly about I think it technically is 4,800 and change square foot rectangle, and this is what Larry Bollinger laid out as for a central warehouse fans operation. This is what you would need. For instance, the cooler and refrigerator we have now are not drive-in by forklift, and they're not very tall. Matter of fact, I have to duck just to go into one. Very inefficient to load and unload bulk products. The ones we would put in new, whether it be the 5,000-foot warehouse on the school sites or the Olive warehouse, it would be a forklift drivable in, high stacking, kind of think Home Depot shelving type of storage, which is very efficient and would improve a lot of operations.
Okay. Well, no, that's all good news. So that I appreciate that. The proposed maintenance and what are we going to call the building out at Hamilton now? It's going to just be maintenance and operations grounds, I guess. Or?
Well, I'm not going to recommend MOG, but MONG. I
think you mentioned that as some sort of a Butler type building, and I'm assuming there's already utilities there. It's thank you to Trustee Millick for bringing up the culvert and the drainage, but since there was a building there already, I assume sewer and some of the other things that we could tie, because we'll have to tie into the
right,
city.
We definitely have to review what's there, and I think it's not been updated for a while, because matter of fact, the gravel that's there was the old slab for the commissary or exchange building.
But this Butler type building you're proposing is it's a permanent structure. It's
correct. I'm sorry, Butler's a brand name. My previous experience, we just called easy to put together building prefab.
Simple but permanent is what
correct.
We're proposing. And
pre-engineered.
And the estimate also includes
prefab.
The paving, whatever it ends up being. You guys think you got that covered? Okay. My last question has to do with the 1.9 million. And I don't know if you're in a position to answer this question, but so maybe we can get it later. But this 1.9 million, which is the set aside, I guess, in a reserve or designated to be spent at the Hamilton parcel, and I just wanted to have some assurances is that all of it? Is it designated for parcel A or parcel B and things along those? Do we have that information tonight, or can you get that?
I do not, but I could, as I understand it, it was a amount put into the master plan to know that we needed to do something to develop.
Well,
C
you're
Street.
saying that 1.9 million is actually in the facilities.
It is a
bond
facilities master plan project called C Street Development. and
That's
it's all-
entirely different as to what I understood. I thought you were talking about a set-aside reserve that we had for the Hamilton parcel. I think we do.
I think we
I
did too.
I will check.
We are not discussing that particular reserve amount at this point. So, but just, that was the question.
Apologize for any confusion. I just wanted to point out that we had put a project in the facilities master plan to invest.
The facilities master plan,
Correct.
Measure G bond.
I,
Okay,
Not to be
Nancy's going to speak to
confused.
this.
Oh, you-
All right, here we go.
Thank you, Nancy.
About what I know of it is called the Hamilton like triangle. There was a gift and those proceeds, is that what you're referring to?
It's like $1 million or?
Yeah, and it's held in fund, I believe 40, that we have funds set aside, but I
this
have,
was different.
I think this is completely
Yeah, this was
different.
just a
Yeah,
bond. I mean,
I think, thank you. That's confirmation of one, that it
I can
exists.
tell you exactly how much is in there in a minute.
All right. So I'm glad to hear that it's, at this point, we're not tapping that reserve.
I apologize, I didn't know
private.
about that reserve, but didn't mean to confuse the
So
two.
okay, thank you.
Trustee
So
Cooper.
my question, I think this is a great idea to get both of these facilities off of our campuses. And so that's the good news. I do have a question about the Olive Street building. Two
Yes.
questions, actually. One of them, is there any additional structural cost that you haven't explored already, or?
We did the renovation for the.
I mean, I understand you're probably gonna be just putting things inside a shell.
Correct.
Essentially.
I think it may involve structural, looking at the connections between the tilt panels. Oftentimes, buildings in that area require a minor upgrade, but I wouldn't think it would be anything significant. It appears to be a very well-constructed building.
Okay, that would be my only concern. All of a sudden, we get a $2 million upcharge for putting some new brackets in or drilling
Yeah.
down to.
I think really the most significant addition to the building would be the walk-in freezers that we have to do, or roll-in freezers that we have to do. And those are going to brace to the exterior walls in all likelihood. They won't bear on them, but there might be a potential minor upgrade associated with that. The rest of it is essentially demising walls and pretty simple stuff.
Okay. Mark?
I just wanted to add that when the roof collapsed over the bus maintenance area, they retrofitted that whole building with tensioners that basically keep that whole thing together. So, I mean, there's information there that Todd doesn't have yet, but he will have that information. And
Probably already
I
been,
think it's
those
been
upgrades have
retrofitted
probably already been done.
completely already. Yeah.
It already failed, is what I'm trying to tell you.
And then my last question on that is there in fact enough, you've mentioned semi-trucks going in and out of the other locations. Is there enough, in fact, going down that little driveway and being able to turn around and do whatever they have to do?
At the Olive Warehouse?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let, we do that.
I'm like several times a week.
Perfect.
And I mean, full-length semis drive
Oh,
around through there.
not
Yeah,
an issue
it's
then.
amazing what they do.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, where do they turn around? And then finally, I lied. One more question. DSA approval, is this, the Olive Street facility require DSA approval, or it's clear? Okay, thank you.
Just to answer your question, they, I think, use the turnaround the buses do.
What?
Correct, Mark?
Yeah.
Trucks come in, deliver and do
Around the
Right.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, this is discussion action, and staff has come with a request.
I'll move that we approve the staff request for option 3.
Okay,
Second?
Actually, though, if I may, with the request that we look into using the funds that Nancy identified as potentially funding this project.
I don't know if we can do that one.
I don't think anybody over here is ready to support that.
No.
We
Okay,
need to learn
okay,
more.
all right.
you just
I will keep it
let's make a
simple.
request
I go
for
back. If we could find out the story there, okay. So back to my original.
And my second stance.
Okay, all the, question?
I think there's probably a consensus to give direction to the superintendent to get us, the board, a report on the existing set aside. Fund 40, I heard tonight, the
Okay,
purpose of the
from
fund.
40?
Maybe just bring the, Fianci, I'm sure that we could get more detail, but it's come up. Clarity would be good. Would that
Okay,
be
is
okay
that
with
something
the
you can
board?
provide in the Friday update? Okay,
All right,
all
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Do you want to amend your?
Okay,
Oh, it's
so,
back to the original one, just approving option 3 per the.
okay, do you want to read it into the record so everyone's clear?
Move that we approve staff recommendation for option 3.
Thank you. Ross seconds. Okay, all those in favor? And all those opposed? Okay,
Thank you very
6,
much,
1.
and we'll come back with
Thank you.
schematic design for that option at a future board meeting.
We've been talking about this for 20 years. Ever since that Hamilton property was acquired, this has been a conversation.
okay. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item, and I'm going to let Trustee Butler
get the
resume her
maintenance guys
position
off
as
the
president, taking over the meeting.
They took me out of the closet. Okay. All right, we'll go back to our staff reports and begin at the top. And we have our local control accountability plan. Hi, Julia. And you have some documents at your table. You have the presentation at your table.
And the actual version of the LCAP is, I think, just provided to you electronically and available online.
Yeah, that's correct. 100 and some odd pages. We didn't want to.
146.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
So, good evening. Glad to be here. This is the annual presentation of the LCAP. This is, again, a 3-year plan, so we've talked about it quite a bit this year on how we've gone about putting this plan together. And the result is that 146-page document, but I'm going to go through the executive summary of that very briefly. I'm going to review some of the aspects of the LCAP that you saw last year, just to remind us of this process and the requirements around it. First of all, it is a 3-year plan, so we're in the 2nd year of that 3-year cycle. Last year's plan was the reformat of the template and that type of thing. This year, we're making updates to any changes to metrics, strategies, and actions, and I'll go through any of those changes with you tonight. We currently have 3 goals aligned to the state priorities. The other change is that there's a federal addendum, so the federal government also wants us to speak on how we're using our monies, and that will come before you next week for approval, along with the LCAP itself. Really, the addendum is us repeating much of what we say in the version in federal speak. That is the best way that I can say it. So they ask a lot of the same questions specific to some of the title money. So we're working on that, and then it needs to be approved before August, but the recommendation from the county is that you approve it along with the full LCAP. So again, there are 8 state LCAP priority areas that we must ensure are covered through the LCAP. Basic services, implementation of state standards, parent involvement, pupil achievement, which we'd call student achievement, student engagement, school climate, and then course access. The other ones that you see up there are for the county Office of Eds and other alternative settings. And then within each one of those priority areas, as you may remember last year, we're required to provide several different metrics. These are the required metrics, and then as a district, we come up with our own local indicators on how we're doing in each one of those priority areas. And so through the template, you'll see how we're meeting each one of the priority areas and the associated metrics with how we've met those priority areas. Again, the template in this part of the template has not changed. This is a repeat from last year. It's the part of the template that should maintain some consistency through the 3 years of the plan. The overview of the LCAP, luckily, fortunately for me, The actual template of the LCAP did not change this year, so it follows the same template as last year, and we just had to go through and update it. The only change to the update, or to the actual template, is that addendum, the federal addendum. So I'm going to go through each one of these areas in terms of what has changed and how we've kind of grown and looked at ourselves as a district. The first, and I'm going to reference also the long version, in case you want to log in and take a look at that. This is on page 1 through 3 of that, the large long version, and this is kind of the highlights from this year. You'll see the information, the updated demographics of what our district looks like. Some of the things that we've highlighted is the creation of the final graduate profile. So there's a PDF of that document within the plan itself. The one-to-world implementation, so us rolling those Chromebooks out to students is a pretty big move for a district, so we've highlighted that. And then also, because there are some pretty big changes within the LCAP because of the Budget Advisory Committee, we make mention to how those cuts impacted the supplemental funding in particular, and how we're making sure we're still doing increased improved services for the students that this is that those supplemental funds are for. The other thing that I do want to mention, and this is what most districts do, is the long version of the LCAP is the full budget. So I work closely with Nancy to include all monies that we spend, and we structure it so that under Goal 1, I'll talk about how we structure and put all those monies in there. So within there's not just the supplemental. So the highlights are the next portion of the LCAP, and these are kind of the things that we're real proud of this year, either from the metrics or the actions and strategies. We have talked about the increase in student achievement in math, so we've highlighted that there and hoping to continue to track that metric. It is one of the metrics within the document. AVID, the newcomer counselor, so that position was previously grant funded, and now it's going to be funded in the supplemental, through supplemental funding. And what that has allowed us to do is add an additional newcomer counselor for our elementary. So we're going to have one newcomer counselor at elementary and one at secondary upon this approval. And one of the reasons that we're putting it into the supplemental is that it does retain some consistency, and then we know it's a little bit more of a permanent position in that way, because this funding is a little bit more stable than grants and otherwise. Expanded ELD and intervention courses. So this has been an ongoing thing within the LCAP, and what we also are taking a look at is where are we clustering some of our low income in English learners. That includes some of our math intervention classes, as well as those ELD classes. So we're counting those under, and we're funding those sections through supplemental funding. Enhanced mental health services. So this came up through, and I'll talk about this later, all the stakeholder engagement. Almost every single group I spoke to said how important it is to maintain the mental health services for our students, and that we need to make sure that students have consistent access to that. And so that is in the plan. There's an increase in the cost of that, partially because we had used some carryover funding to fund some of the mental health counselors last year, so it didn't show up as much as it actually is costing. And there's also a cost of living increase that we're experiencing from our providers. It's also included in here, and you'll see it as kind of its separate action item, is the continued support of the P5 work. Previously known as P3 with MCF, we've expanded all of that work to each one of the elementary schools, and so we've ensured again that there's some consistency and that we know that that work will continue. And then the equity work. So both with the National Equity Project, EPIC Education, are some of the highlights that you're going to see kind of flow through the whole document, because we kind of call each one of these things out as the strategies that we're using to close that achievement gap. And I apologize if I get repetitive, because that's the way that the document runs, but I'm trying to pull out the theme so you get the basic idea. One of the next sections talks about the greatest need. So I actually just pulled, and the document doesn't do well with PDF, so I can't put pretty graphs in there. That's why it turns out the way it does, but for you guys, I'm going to put a pretty graph up here so we can talk about what this looks like for our students. So with our two student groups that are in the greatest need, and we've talked about this at length, and we have strategies to address these two groups in particular. These aren't student groups that are necessarily generating the funds of supplemental funding, but they are two student groups that obviously we need to pay attention to, and the state wants us to pay attention to through the California dashboard, and that's the students with disabilities and our African American students. One of the things that we mention about our African American students is that it is a small group of students, which tends to create some large fluctuations in the way that the scores turn out. But these particular metrics do not have that same effect because we're looking at percentage over time. It's not based on numbers that might fluctuate more if it's a really small group of students. And then your students with disabilities. All students, and this was a common trend throughout the state, saw a dip in English language arts and mathematics. Almost every single district in the state, and I think we've mentioned this before, saw a dip in this, so there was some concern around what's going on with the actual tests that we're looking at. But with that being said, it's still bringing up some concerns for particular student groups. So once you take a look at the California dashboard, what we do from there, and we've done this with our district advisory committee, and we've talked about this with each one of the stakeholder groups that we've reached out to, is now from here, what does this mean? What strategies are we going to use to close the gap between some of our student groups, particularly the ones that are showing up red or orange? The Trivial Pursuit icons, again, blue being the best, and red being that there's an increase in whatever's happening there, and that it's lower than the state average, depending on what it is. So if it's a suspension rate, it means that it's higher than the state average, but red means bad, basically. So those performance gaps, like I mentioned, this is another part of the large plan. We talk about what are some of our strategies to address that. So without being repetitive, I talk about some of the other major strategies we have. Our instructional coaches are critical in order to close that achievement gap because they're working with our teachers around things like standards-based grading, learning targets, that type of work. They're critical to ensure something that continues to come up with our stakeholders, which is how do we ensure students have an equitable learning environment? And that's one of the work that the coaches do, the equity work. So again, with our partners, EPIC Education National Equity Project, and that idea of standards-based grading itself is equity in action. So a lot of that work is really going to help address those gaps that we just took a look at. Because we have, going back to this slide, some concern around the suspension rate with those two groups, we also make mention to restorative justice work that's happening. K-12 in the district, we know that teachers are being trained on restorative justice practices, tier 1 things that can happen in the classroom to ensure students are not being referred at higher rates if they have a disability or from some of the subgroups that we know are overrepresented for those things. And then the elementary adoption of the units of study for reading is definitely another strategy that will address that gap. One of the things that we also will speak to with the federal government, because they like this kind of speak, is that you're adopting a research-based curriculum that is known to work with underrepresented populations. So we also speak to the Lucy Calkins adoption. And then finally, we speak to learning target work. That's going to be deep, hard, long, year-long work that's really going to make a difference for kids. So that work is what is also going to address those performance gaps, and those are connected with the instructional coaches as well. From there, just to make note, one of the things that we need to keep an eye on as you move forward is if you see red in this area, so this is the equity dashboard, this is what the main thing that you look at when you pull up the California dashboard. If we saw any red in this front page is where you'd really be concerned as a district. And as you can see right now, we're doing fine. The thing I want to mention about the English learner progress is that we actually have good rates of students being reclassified and redesignated, and they're doing quite well. The reason it's yellow is because you see there's been a slight increase in that. So our percentage overall of like our, the percentage of all of our English learners who are being redesignated or moving up a level is high, meaning that we're higher than a lot of other districts, but it decreased. So that brings you to yellow, if that makes sense. So this is the dashboard that you keep an eye on in terms of bringing you into differentiated assistance. Right now, you're not in differentiated assistance. That's what the county would come in and say, now we need to start working with you to make sure you're addressing that. And right now, we don't have that concern. If you went, and I'm going to go back to the side, if you start to see a lot of red in these deeper areas, again, that would pull you into differentiated assistance. So right now, we're not there yet. Depending on how that state test continues to look, that might be something to keep an eye on. The next portion I'm going to go through a little quickly because, again, these are things that we talked about last year because our metrics have not changed.
Julia, would you mind just backing up to this slide? This slide for Shelley. She has a question.
Of course. Question. Socioeconomic disadvantage, is that in one of these somewhere in terms of tracking, in terms of
so
performance indicators? I was just curious about the socioeconomic disadvantaged students. Are they in here somewhere, or are we tracking that some other way?
So on this slide or on?
I just wasn't this one.
Oh, okay.
I was just
curious.
It
doesn't have, no, they don't, that student group doesn't have its own category.
Doesn't,
No,
okay.
English learner progress has its own category because we have particular metrics that we're looking at. So for that metric, the English learner progress metric, you're looking to see that students are moving up one CELT level or are being redesignated every single year. So if I'm close to being redesignated, I should be moving up. And I think right now we're at I want to say 80% of our students are either making growth 1 year or they're being redesignated. We don't have a similar thing like that for low-income students.
Okay.
Good question, though. Yeah. No worries. So again, goal one, none of our metrics have changed. We simply go through, and this is the part of the time-consuming part for staff, is to go through and update all of these metrics. It's stuff that we look at all year long, so it's on the tip of our computer tongue, I guess you could say, anyways. But then the actions and services themselves have not changed a whole lot either, besides adding the newcomer counselor. The goal one, keep in mind, these are services that we as a district say are directly provided to students themselves. So goal one is around student success. So we identify all of the strategies that we know are directly contacted with our students. So included in this, in the whole budget, so these are the supplemental strategies that we have, are our teachers, there are counselors, there are school administrators are included, their costs are included in this part. So when you go through the long version, you'll see the cost of all of our teachers. So goal one is our most expensive goal, as it should be, because that's the one that's student success. Goal two, again, our metrics have not changed. A lot of these are required by the state in order to identify and measure our progress on those priority areas. There has been some changes around the coaches support and the PD effectiveness. We've made notes around shifting the way that you're measuring that, and that I think you'll come up with a better metric next year. And then the percentage of trained teachers, that one will also probably shift just because right now you have the majority of your teachers trained. And so those two will start to just be maintenance ones, and then identify some other ones to move forward. So under this one, these are the actions and services. This is staff and support. So these are all the actions and services that we say are in support of ensuring that we have high quality teachers and that they have the support they need to be the best they can in the classroom. So this is where our instructional coaches are. It's where a lot of our professional learning is. It's all of the equity work with the different organizations coming in and supporting the teachers. The P5 work, again, falls into this goal area. And then again, going to the long version, the school district administrators are included in this, as we're one removed from the student, so to speak. So I would be my salary, for example, would be under goal 2 because I'm more directly supporting teachers and from that level. So any of those types of things are from there when you go into the actual. The last goal is around community involvement. So all of these metrics, again, there are some very specific ones that we need to use that the state requires. That includes our LCAP survey, that's parent participation, and then we've included SBAC data as well. So in terms of goal 3, there hasn't been any major changes except to include that online multilingual parent registration system. So allowing parents to access enrollment and registration forms online in their native language is one that has now been included in there. And then we removed PK with the intent not to, I shouldn't say removed, but we've found through our input sessions that it's a better service used every other year, because parents, once they go through it, they don't need to go through it every year. And so in order to make the most out of the program, we'll do it every other year. With some of the schools, we'll be able to fund it if they haven't done it in a while through their own funds, but as a district, we'll do that every other year. So I would anticipate next year that you would include it in your goal 3 and have that as, as one of the costs again. But it's not a significant amount of money, so again, people can fund it through their own school sites if there is one. But what we're finding is that our participation numbers were dropping, not because it wasn't an effective program, but because most parents had either gone through it in middle school or high school because we had been offering it every single year at every single campus. So again, this is the visual breakdown of how the full budget is incorporated into the LCAP. So you'll see how Nancy and I work on these big chunks to put them in each one of these goals so that you can see how we're putting that all together. The last and couple parts are probably the most important in terms of changes. This is, a lot of how we make determinations on how we're going to change anything in here. Our stakeholder engagement is input, meaning that still it's at the decision of the district itself to determine how we're making changes, but this engagement is important in order to say, what do we need to take a closer look at? So this is a short list. In the full version, we did a great deal of engagement, and we've had been applauded quite a bit by the county in terms of how much engagement we've done. One of the big ways is through the District Advisory Committee. Meeting consistently and coherently over several meetings is really helpful, because it means that the individuals there are really informed about how we're using this money and why, and it's good full engagement rather than randomly doing a couple meetings a year. And then we met with DLAC. We did the Youth Truth Survey, which you heard about earlier this year, had a great increase in participation. We met with PTA, and then a lot of different input through school and district staff. Sorry about the size of the words on this slide, but this is, I was actually just pulling it from the actual LCAP, is some of the consultations, how do they, and this is the wording, how did these consultations influence the LCAP process? So this was a lot of the different feedback that we considered and heard from the community as we moved through the process. I'm not going to go through each one. Some of this is repetitive in terms of what you see there, but there was a lot that spoke to ensuring that we have high quality instruction for all students. Oh, and one of the other things I forgot to mention, because was included and then we took it out and now it's included again, is the class size reduction at 4th and 5th grade. And that one goes under goal 1. It is definitely in the long version. I just didn't include it in the presentation. Sorry about that. But I saw it up there as one of the stakeholder engagement items. So, all right. And then one of the parts of the LCAP that's scrutinized closely by the county and is what we really do have to spend some quality time on making sure that we're meeting is that proportionality state requirement, meaning that do we increase and improve services to these students by the percentage required by the state. And our percentage this year is 7.36%. And we do a formula basically taking our core educational staffing. So we have 300 odd that are falling into this core, what we're calling the core. You'll see it broken out on table A. That then we basically divide that by the number of individuals, FTE, that we're funding through the supplemental. And then we come up with our percentage, and that is just the FTE that are funded through the supplemental. That comes up with a percentage of 7.89%, so we do meet the requirement there. And we're showing above and beyond, not just by the percentage, but by enhancing or improving the quality of the experience of students. And you'll see some of those things can't be measured by an FTE, if that makes sense. And so that Table A, I have to work with the county on making sure it gets uploaded correctly, but that Table A is really what they look at to say, okay, you've met your requirement in terms of increased services for our students. So I think that is my last slide. So any direction you have to give me or questions, we'll take at this time. This is just the presentation, and the next week it'll come back to you for approval.
Okay, board members, comments, questions? You've seen one LCAP, you've seen them all? No.
146
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a bit of work goes into it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Truly understand that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Julia, so moving forward, as you're moving on to other things, what would be your advice to this body here, looking ahead to the next several years in terms of the LCAP? What do we need to keep an eye on? And I know that's a loaded question, so.
I would say one of the strategies that I think has made the most impact, because the LCAP's intent is to ensure that you have local control as the board to address the needs of the students that are underserved. And the strategy that I think has been working the most is creating powerful collaboration with teachers so they can come together and create learning targets, standards-based grading, and better learning environments. And that's done through the instructional coaches. So if I would give you one thing, it's ensure that you have some of that type of support going forward, because I think it's the National Equity Project that has that wonderful quote that they use from Margaret Mead, that is, a small group of committed people can solve any problem. You know, they can, and that's true of your teachers. You have amazing teachers in this district, a lot of teachers with good experience that can come together, and your math teachers have started to do that, and I think you can do that with every subject. So yeah, you ask the questions, that's absolutely what I've been so impressed with, what the teachers can do when they come together and they have time to do that. And a lot of what we've used the supplemental funding has been bringing teachers together to do professional development. And it takes time to tweak that, because certainly there were times that we didn't know quite stops and starts around it, but there's some really good progress that you're making around that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Cooper, thank you for asking that. Trustee Gila?
Hi. A few years ago, when we started this equity project, you expressed concern to me about some of the things that it was just the beginning, so we weren't there yet. And so here we are years later, and I wanted to ask you if you said that we should ensure that we continue to do this. And so in your opinion, have we reached and have we fixed some of the concerns that you had in mind back in those years?
You've been an amazing board in terms of trusting staff to make some hard decisions, in particular around my concerns around the equity of tracking students. So you've done some really hard decisions, and I commend you for that. It's been a pleasure to work with a board that says, okay, we're going to take this risk, and hopefully you can follow through on it. And that includes doing things that are not necessarily popular around having a strong middle school math pathway has done amazing things for students. Ensuring that your 9th grade classes are not tracked, so students don't walk into high school and automatically you're tracked into different grades. I had an email from a teacher saying, thank you, my 9th grade English classes are amazing. They're high quality, my kids come in and you did something good for kids. Any little bit more diversity would probably be something that I would, if I had more time with you, would start looking at to tackle. And I'll leave the programs unnamed because I think you know some of the areas that could use some more diversity there. So, yeah.
Here.
Here.
There you go. Yeah, she'll be back for the.
I
No,
won't
don't
be
say
back
that.
next week. So,
Oh, I missed that.
yes,
Oh.
I've been
This is it.
excused because it's my husband's 40th birthday
Oh.
next week. So, is that okay?
Yeah. Well, this is your last presentation
This is my last
for Novato. Yes.
With that thought in mind, I would like to thank you for years of service to the kids in this town, and the comments you just offered, which is how can we do a better job, is the question you asked when you came here and is the question you're still asking when you leave, and I really appreciate the commitment you've given to the Novato community and the children in this town, and thank you very much. And I'm sorry you won't be here next week, but or going forward. Thank you very much.
Anyway, Trustee No?
I have a lot of technical questions that I won't ask tonight, but I think it's really cool. I mean, you've done some really good work here, so I'll just tag on to what Trustee Miller said, take advantage of the opportunity. Very grateful because I was, we were here when this LCAP thing was invented, and there was a lot of, holy moly. So it's amazing to me how well of a job that you brought it down. You've corralled this herd of cats that is our district, and that you should be commended for that. We also went down a few paths that didn't turn out to be right, but that's because no one, not even the state knew what to do at a handful of times. So I think you should be recognized for the effort that you put into those experimental paths or techniques or the work that you did that turned out to be set aside. Let's put it that way. So very grateful to you as well, and proud to say that we have an excellent LCAP here in Novato, and because of that, and you're the reason for that. So thank you.
Trustee Neldo, but you said you had a lot of questions. Wouldn't you rather have Julia here and ask them? You're not going to ask them next week,
No,
then, right?
I'm gonna be fine. They're money questions, so I'll get Yancy.
Well,
when
there
it's
is,
been
there
there.
is if you, all right, Mom.
You can ask me those questions too. I have no problem answering them.
I know I can,
because
but I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just around that, Julie, I just want to commend you and just thank you for your years of service, because you're just a rock star and I appreciate it. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, I mean, this 146-page thing was, that's a lot of information, but I appreciated the budget summary that they've added on here too to associate the dollars with it. So I was happy about that. I'm not sure if that's a requirement or not. In fact, I was trying to look back and I couldn't get to it in my garage to see, because I have it filed away from last year, but I was curious if it was in there last year or not, or if we had asked for it, but I was happy to see it, so thank you.
All right, this was a staff report, and Julia will come back next week. So, and again, we really appreciate your service to this district. You've done amazing work, and I know you're going to go on to be an assistant superintendent, which is the next step. So, congratulations to you.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Job well
Thank you
done.
for all you've done.
Thank you.
thank you for all that you've allowed me to do. So I appreciate it. It's been an honor to serve you. And
Good
I
luck
think
to you.
Yeah.
Gladys said the word is that you're an exquisite board. I like that, and I think it's true because you're passionate and you.
Say that louder. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you get lower to the mic?
Exquisite board. You always allow staff to go forward with the things, and you trust, and you are courageous. So those are things that the community needs in a board, so I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. All right, now we get to talk money. This is the staff report for the next 2018-19 preliminary general fund budget. And as we said, Yancy is not here, so we have Nancy Walker here to present. Yeah. And you have a presentation copy at your table.
there's two different there we go, okay. Hi, good evening. That was so graceful. So I am going to walk us through the 2018-19 proposed budget. We were here last April and we presented the budget assumptions that we'd be using to develop the budget. And that information was based upon the governor's January proposal. So now here we are in June, and this budget was developed using the May revise. And of course, a couple of days ago, I just found out something else, so we'll be back, but not right now. That's a budget. It's a snapshot, as of today, what we know. It amazes me when people say, well, why did it change? And it's because, let's hope it does, or someone's not paying attention. Yeah, so as I said, the budget was used with the assumptions from the May revise, from the governor's proposed budget, as well as guidance from the MCOE common message, which I think all of you have received a copy of. One thing that I wanted to point out, first and foremost, that this budget was developed, of course, the one thing that I truly love about the LCAP, even though it's a tremendous amount of work for everyone involved, but it really helps you establish a plan. Where are you spending your money? What's important? And for so many years, I think a lot of districts didn't really, talk about what are we going to do and how are we going to spend these dollars, especially the supplemental grant funds. So this budget aligns with the LCAP. It is the LCAP, as well as with the district goals and priorities. So it's a really interesting process, getting all the information from everyone. The one takeaway, I attended the governor's conference, the May revise, and the one message that that was loud and clear was, now is the time to save. Much of our funding lately has been one-time in nature, the current year, as well as proposed for next year. And of course, with one-time money, best practices is to use those dollars for one-time costs, not necessarily ongoing. So that was my public service announcement on that. The budget assumptions as far as changes from when we met in April, the COLA is a little bit higher than what we had initially heard in the January budget. It's at 3%. The official COLA was 2.71, and then some additional funds that were added on to fund LCFF funding. Additionally, GAP is funded at 100%. The GAP, the difference between what you're getting and what I owe you, now it's all there. Enrollment is projected to decline by 109 students next year. That doesn't necessarily come as a surprise. We had a enrollment projection report, and our birth rates are down in California as well as Marin County. We have the option of using current year or prior year when calculating our LCFF revenues, and of course we've been using the prior year for 7 years. So one thing that when we came with the budget assumptions, in April we were projecting no one-time money. This year we're looking at $344 per student. It's about $2.5 million of one-time money. Remember this year, in 2017-18, we also received some one-time money, so the net increase is about $1.4 million. The mandated block grant, we don't receive a whole lot of funding. It's on a per-student allocation. We opted into the block grant, as most school districts did, rather than individual mandates. So that will continue on. Our routine repair and maintenance. So this year, the requirement to participate in the state school building program for modernization or new construction, the requirement is you have to have 3% reserve. Next year it'll be at the year after it'll be at 3%, but next year we're looking at 2.63, which is up a little bit from the current year. one thing I wanted to point out is our reserve level for unrestricted general fund plus Fund 17. We have a slight increase, and that's due to the proposed budget includes using $1 million of the one-time money and transferring it into Fund 17, the reserve that the board established for future STRS and PERS increases. So initially we were looking at having a 10% reserve combining the two funds, and now we're at 12%, kind of short term. Here is our projected enrollment, past and in the future. I did not include 2021. We're looking at an additional decline of 124 in 2021, bringing our enrollment to 7,300 2 years from now. Over the last 7 years, we've lost 464 students from 2014-15, projecting out with our multi-year projection. And when you think about 464 students, our average elementary size right now, our projected for next year, is 368. So that's almost losing a full 1 1/4 schools. Our projected staffing is 389.5 FTE. That includes our staffing reserve, special education, all of our programs. And these are not site-funded positions. These are part of our department and school site budgets, and every single FTE is accounted for. Looking at next year and comparing to this year, so in summary, the full report provided every single detail. I want to just touch on some of the major changes from this current year and moving into next year. So like I said, COLA is at 3%. We do have declining ADA. We're going to use a prior year ADA for funding purposes. We're looking at a $3.3 million increase in LCFF funding. We have a one-time state mandate funding of $2.5 million. Again, that's a net increase of 1.4. We removed all one-time and deferred revenues. Our expenditures are down 3.75. We've decreased staffing due to declining enrollment, as well as we've staffed closer to contract. We've incorporated the BAC board-approved budget recommendations, which I've included on slide 19, for savings of $1.5 million. We have the annual increase of STRS and PERS, which is about $1 million. And then we received next year's projected transfer of service or excess costs. These are students served by MCOE-operated programs, and the projection provided shows an increase of $320,000, which we were not really happy with. We removed one-time costs and budgeted carryovers. The projected deficit spending continues, $700,000 next year, $2.1 million the year after, and $2.8 the following. Our reserves are met in all 3 years. And if you have any questions regarding, you got the full report, you're welcome to any time or after. In looking at where does the money come in from, we're looking at LCFF is 76% of our general fund budget. Our federal revenues account for 3%, state revenues 9%, and again, remember, most of that is one-time money, and then our local revenues are at 12%. On the flip side, for expenditures, 79% of our budget is salary and benefits. We have the STRS on behalf, which we covered a few years ago. It's an accounting entry. It really isn't a cost or a revenue source. Our transfer of services, this would include transfers out to other funds, as well as the excess costs to MCOE is 4% of our budget. Our operating expenditures, which includes insurance, utilities, many of the identified short version of the LCAP, and our non-public school and non-public agency costs, and our supplies account for 3%. So if you go a little deeper, where are those funds distributed? 67% of our general fund budget is directly at the site level. That includes everything operational, staffing, instructional at each school site. We have 6% at the district office, 6% with maintenance and special ed transportation, and then 16% pupil services, and then 5% is other, which I break it down on the next slide. That shows you how the funds are allocated at each school site as well as within each department and kind of classification. And the other costs are STIRS on behalf, the transfer of $1 million to Fund 17 for future STIRS and PERS increases. We make a contribution to our self-insurance fund as we are self-insured. And then our annual cost for retiree health benefits is about $100,000. So those costs I kind of classified as other. So in looking at where all of the dollars are going, this kind of gives you a little bit more of a deeper drill down. And then I also included our site allocations. And the gray is unrestricted revenues that are provided to our school sites. Supplemental grant funding is also unrestricted. There are some restrictions. It's to increase and improve services. Some of the dollars are, each school gets a $25,000 allocation, and they use it mainly for intervention programs. And then not all of our schools are Title I. The Title I allocations, Title II. Linwood is the only school that operates an after-school, the ACES program. All of our schools receive restricted lottery funds for instructional materials. And then we allocate a small amount per school who operate SDC classes on their campus, so they have additional supplies. And you'll see PTA, these are just based on a commitment letter. We have one school that funds a part-time intervention person, and so those dollars are included on here. That's not all of the funds that they receive. They're recorded as or recognized as they're received. And then we have our MCF and HOS grants and parcel tax, which funds, I believe it's $7 per student at the middle school and high schools for additional supplies, and our athletics program. That's not our complete athletics program budget, but these are the amounts that the sites have control over, and they pay for various fees and reconditioning of equipment and things like that. And our 2018-19 proposed budget, combined general fund, the fund balance and reserves, we're looking at having a fund balance of almost $9.2 million. I've identified the legally restricted balance. These are restricted funds, the reserve for economic uncertainty, and then we have designations that we've set aside for declining enrollment and gap funding, should that not be fully funded a year from now. I also wanted to point out that our estimated actuals includes $750,000 that we're kind of projecting that our school sites and departments may not necessarily spend. I know in the current year budget, we have some stipends that were earmarked to come out of the supplemental grant fund, but we had excess funds left over in a grant that we're going to use. It's a use or lose situation. So we'll have some of those dollars likely carry over. And then we have the CTE grant that's $940,000. That's a matching program. The first year is a $1 to $1. You spend $1 and you can use $1 of funding. The second year is 1.5, 1 to 1.5, and then 1 to 2 ratio, $2 of ours and $1 of the grant. So those dollars will not be fully expended. So our kind of best guess is that we'll probably end with probably 10.9 versus the 9 million, but we can't back out their budgets right now at this moment. We'll bring that information back with the unaudited actuals. The multi-year projections, not a whole lot has changed other than the COLA had a slight increase for 1920 from the January budget versus the May revise. We will have fully funded our 3% reserve, or our 3% contribution to the restricted repair and maintenance program. Our reserve level in Fund 1 in the general fund in Fund 17 is 9.76 in 1920 compared to 5.2, so it's up a little over 4% from the budget assumptions that we brought forward. And again, that's because of the one-time funding and a little bump up in LCFF. So in looking at the multi-year projection, in 1920, we've removed the one-time dollars. We're looking at a 1.8% increase on the LCFF, a little over 2% in 2021, but overall revenues are down 1.2 in 1920, and then a slight increase in 2021. Our salaries and benefits, 3% increase. That's really just STRS, PERS, and then we have our step and column movement that occurs on the natural. Our net increase is actually a decrease. As I mentioned earlier, we are deficit spending $2 million in 1920 and 2.7 in 2021. Our ending fund balance, I think it's important to look at where we are projected to be next year in terms of where we're projected to be 1920 and 2021. I mean, we're 76% in the first out year down in our fund balance, and then an additional 46%. So something to be mindful of. And a lot of this is due to STRS and PERS rates increasing. We're looking at between 1.8 to 2% increases over the last 8 years, or projected to be through the 8 years, where we've increased these costs over $6 million during that time frame.
Those numbers have changed slightly since the April.
Absolutely.
How does that happen?
That happens due to, in April, we did not have the board-approved BAC recommendations. So these are actual costs to actual costs. We had several more positions projected in the budget than we do now. When we look at how many positions were taken out of the budget, just on declining enrollment, 11, we had 2 coaches taken out of the budget, 2 certificated administrators. Got my memory shot. 1 classified position at the district office.
Right. You have it on the next couple slides. You have it listed.
Okay, thank you. So they're actual costs.
Yes, okay.
So that's where that change would come from. So our identified challenges, we know what they are. Structural deficit, ongoing increases in STRS and PERS. Yancey said he would like to address this in more depth next week. I did speak with him, and he wanted to let everyone know he's doing well. Slowing state LCFF funding are essentially flat, a declining enrollment, and then the continued lowered birth rate. Slide 19 provides the Budget Advisory Committee recommendations. So all of the recommendations have been incorporated into the 2018-19 proposed budget. We also have our identified needs, including continuing to fund STRS and PERS, negotiations, the LCAP recommendations, maintaining lower class sizes. Next steps, we have the adopted budget, and more than likely we'll be seeing a 45-day revision, 45 days after January. We're gauging it around the unaudited actuals, which we are required to provide by September 15th, and of course continued budget monitoring. As I mentioned, on the 8th, we understand there's an understanding. We don't have any formal details. They haven't been released, but we should know by next week to be able to let you know what changes in the governor's budget is proposed, and more than likely, because there's been a change, and that typically happens. Before I move on to questions, one thing I wanted to just bring up is the other funds. you had a question about,
Yeah, I'm 40. You have that sheet that has all the funds listed, or
I did.
Yeah. the balance in them, and
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
it's on the
I-
detail.
right, I took a look at that board item and it didn't reference, Fund 40.
Oh.
So I just wanted to clarify, and you're correct, there's $1 million in there, and that is the sale of San Carlos, as well as a gift from
Yeah.
the Roth Foundation.
Yeah. Oh, here it is.
So those dollars are still there. Okay, and then all of our other funds are projected to be in the positive. If you, I don't know if you necessarily want me to go through all of them, but I'm happy to. So, with that,
Shelley's got a question. Trustee Scott, and then Trustee Millerick.
So Nancy, thank you for the presentation and all your hard work on the budget. I appreciate it very much. I have a question around the low birth rate. And at what point will you be recommending to this board, we might have to close the school? I'm just concerned with the low birth weight, or the low birth weight, I'm sorry. I'm getting tired.
yeah.
The low birth rate, I mean, it's at some point, something's got to give. And I just
Absolutely.
don't know where that is, or have you been able to project out for any of that? I just want the warning as soon as
Absolutely. And one thing that came out of the Budget Advisory Committee and recommendations and next steps, two big things.
Okay.
One is an efficiency study on our special education program, and the second one is convening a committee to look at what is the appropriate size of a school, elementary school.
Okay.
And that, I think Yancey will talk more to that, but that is a 2018, 2019. I think we had direction to move forward with those two items, to convene a committee to review that and
Okay, I mean, it's
start
just a
that
concern. I mean, I'm
discussion.
looking at the numbers and
Absolutely.
they just continue to go down, 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 down. And at some point,
Right.
I feel like if we just keep heading down this path, that's inevitable. But I want to prepare
Yeah.
if we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely, that is,
Okay, a concern. Okay.
uh-huh,
Thank-
yeah,
Trustee Millerick?
Can you jump to slide 16?
sure.
I think I memorized it correctly. Although I like this picture, it's just. Good.
Oh, I love this. That's who I feel like I am right there.
That's not slide 16.
16.
That one right there.
Yes.
Okay, so, you have three numbers there, pardon me, there's three numbers there, which are the net increase, decrease in fund balance.
Yes.
So this is basically what our three-year projection is, they're gonna go to the county. They're alarming to me, but do you think the county will, approve us without conditions if we give them a three-year projection that shows we're gonna have our reserves?
Well, I know that we will receive a review letter from the county. They will address this. They will provide us with a graph that shows for how long and how much are we deficit spending, and that is one of the early warning signs that a district could be in trouble if they didn't address it. I think we began the process last year by convening the Budget Advisory Committee. We reduced $1.5 million in the first year. We've been given instruction to move forward to take a look at what we're doing with our special education program. Is there any efficiencies that we could realize in that program, as well as looking at school size, our elementary school size. And so because of those two items, especially with the school size, I think that would show or demonstrate to the county that these are the things that we're looking at. We're aware of it, and develop a plan. It will be mentioned in their letter, absolutely, without doubt.
Yeah, I don't like when Trina Mars comes up here and talks to us. It's already happened 3 times.
Well,
And it's more than I don't like it. I think this board, this district, and I mean, it's gonna be a public conversation and not a comfortable one.
No.
But I don't think these are acceptable in my view, and I would like to propose we, as a board, start taking action to revise our programs and not wait until 6 more reports, but we start sooner. That's my request. I'm not even sure how to approve this budget next week. This is terrifying.
Well, looking at 2 years out, I think if we pull out the adopted budget every year and look at our 2 years out and we look at how the budget materializes, you know, I think most definitely we have to take pause with this. And this has been going on for several years. It's nothing new.
And my criticism is not of you.
Oh,
your department.
absolutely.
It's a conversation these
Yeah.
7 people need to have.
Yeah.
And give you a clear direction of where we need to go. So don't.
Oh,
if it sounds like I'm concerned. I am. If it sounds like I'm critical of your work, I'm not.
No, you're speaking to the choir. Yep.
Anybody else? This will come back next week for approval, all right?
Thank you so much, Nancy. And
Absolutely.
You heard it, that we really appreciate the work that you put into this.
Sure.
We can't have the conversation without this solid information in front of us.
Great. Okay. And then I have one more.
You have the budget reserve, which is more
Okay.
of a check the box kind of thing. correct?
Absolutely. So, let's see here. So this was a result of SB 858, which came in at the last minute, and there's parts of it we were like, what? And then parts of it we're like, really like. And we like the transparency piece. As far as why do you have such a large reserve? When you look at what's recommended by the Governmental Financial Officers Association, they would recommend a 17% reserve. I know years ago, the board, it wasn't in policy, but kind of established 15%, and which is great. It's recommended to have at least 2 months of payroll. As far as a cash balance as well, there was a time when all of our assets were accounts receivables. Do you remember that? That's kind of scary. Absolutely. So we've provided a breakdown of our fund balance, the $9 million, and the designations, which include our minimum reserve, our 3% required, our restricted funds, and then the reserves that I spoke about for uncertainty with LCFF funding and the gap funding and declining enrollment. I think with this, we've met the requirement. We've shared what's in our fund balance. Why is it there? It's prudent, smart, recommended. I think that's pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty
this
much
is,
it.
we get this every year.
Yeah.
Where we had it last year. So this is an action. No, this isn't. Excuse me. It's another staff. Yeah. So any questions from the board? Again, this will come back
Next week.
next week. Yeah. Okay. We'll move on. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm wondering if we could just move and do the public hearings for those 3 items that we just did, and then we'll go to the 10-year plan. I know it's switching it up again, but let's do that. Yeah, Nancy can be done, and Julia can be done. She's like, yeah. Okay. So one of the procedural things is we do have the 3 staff reports, and then we have to do a public hearing. So it's for procedural purposes. So I'm going to open the public hearing. This is for the 2018-19 Local Control Accountability Plan. The hearing is open. I do not have any comments for people of the public to speak before this item. So let's wait a few seconds. All right, I'm going to close the hearing. And then the next hearing, this is the 2018-19 Preliminary General Fund Budget. I will open the hearing. And I do not have any speakers before this item as well. I will close the hearing. And the last item is the 2018-19 Budget Reserves. I will open the hearing. And I'm going to close the hearing because I don't have anybody before us to speak. All right. Our last item of the evening is the 10-year, Novato High School 10-year facility plan. This was something that was asked by the board to come back. Is he for the stadium lights?
He was. I just explained to him. You already voted. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Good evening again. As usual, I am between between you and the end of the meeting, so. I feel comfortable being in this spot. Okay, real quick, if you remember last fall, this past fall, we came to the board, presented a schematic design for a second turf practice field at Novato High School. At that time, you elected to delay that decision. At the same time, requested additional information be brought back to the board. And some of the information we presented last week, which was the natural grass versus synthetic turf analysis. And the second part requested was sort of a 10-year plan at each high school site, because there's a lot of things going on with the bond, master plan, and then outside of that. And you wanted to make sure that we were covering everything. So tonight, I'd like to present to you a report on options around a 10-year facility plan for Novato High School. Also of note, we are working on the same with San Marin High School. It's at a little slower pace because part of it, for example, their second turf athletic field, they wanted to wait to see how the stadium lights impacted that whole program before we weighed in. So we're still working on that with them, but just at a little slower pace. But so tonight we're bringing you the Novato High School plan. And with that, I broke it already. Okay. Did she turn it off? Oh. Sorry. I can break anything electronic. Got that neck. So real quick tonight, just give you some background on all the things sort of going on at Novato High School. And I also like to point out we have Matt Baldwin, the site principal, here as well, that can provide. No, he just was setting a pill up in the corner there. And it was charging the laptop, still working. But just give you some background on what all is going on at the site. And then we sort of developed 5 options, and they're kind of scaled from the minimum to the maximum. And then sort of a comparison table because it's a lot of information. And of course, answer any questions you might have on material presented. So get into it, the background. A lot going on at Novato High School. As previously approved by the board, we have the new Performing Arts Center that's going in between June 19 and January 2021, new Center for the Sciences building. We're also, because of that Center for the Sciences building, as just discussed previously, relocating the grounds building off of Novato. Also have, outside of the bond program, a junior ROTC marching pavilion through a donation. Needed to find a place for that. The synthetic turf second practice field. We also need to have a location for the 5 tennis courts that we're tearing up 3 of them to put in the Performing Arts Center. And then we had some requests from the site addressing the baseball field, the softball field, and anything we could do with on-campus parking, as I'm sure just experienced by everybody. Okay. Oh, did she take out the wrong one? Does she need this one? Sorry. I thought he was going to, never mind. Thank you, Chris. We had a request for on-campus parking, as I'm sure everybody just experienced with graduation ceremony. It was a hot mess trying to find parking there. So these are the things that we incorporated into the 10-year site plan, working with the site, with Matt, and with the athletic director and some other staff. I think we've identified all the things that are kind of going on in the next 10 years. And just give you a aerial view, this is sort of the Novato High campus. Actually, this is a recent photo from, I believe, February of this year, which is why it's green. So jumping right into option 1. This is building the Performing Arts Center, building the Center for the Sciences building, and building the second athletic turf field. And apologize for the old school, I did the cardboard cutout label maker thing and took a photograph, but still learning how to use Google Maps or Google Earth a little better. And then the tan cardboard cutout is the JROTC marching pavilion. So this is sort of option one where those things will be cited. And then to get into the description and basically no changes to the other athletic fields, no changes to parking. And this estimate comes in at the cost for that second athletic turf field that you've seen before, about $2.7 million. And we kind of use that as a baseline because that's the project's been discussed. So from that, we don't need any additional dollars. So there's your baseline option. And moving to option two, we just continue to add a few things and adjust a few things. In this option, you'll notice we've moved the marching pavilion for the ROTC program to the old tennis courts, and we've set in 5 new tennis courts next to that second turf athletic field. And all the other sites remain the same. Baseball and softball field remain the same, and nothing to parking. And this option is a little bit more, about $4 million, and using the previous option as a baseline, you need an additional $1.3 million to do this. Moving right ahead to option 3, because I like to be different, I did a 3A, B, and a C. In essence, the things stay the same. What we've changed is sort of the materials you'll use in some of those projects, and I'll explain more in just a second. But as you can see, we sort of made the athletic fields line up. We have the second practice field there in turf. We have the softball field relocated from its current location. And in this estimate, it is grass, and we have the baseball field being resodded. And we have the 5 tennis courts moved to a new location, and we've adjusted the location of the ROTC marching pavilion. Yes, the 5 tennis courts, great question, include lights. Yes, yes. Yes, the estimate included the lights, and that goes back to our previous discussion about the CEQA, and we'd have to go through that to make sure that it's okay with that process. For all of those items, this would be $6.1 million and an increase of about $3.5 million. Going on to 3B, which is where things get exciting. Again, the same layout as 3A. We just changed the material. Instead of a a grass softball field and a grass baseball field, we do synthetic turf on the practice field and the softball field. And we reduce the size of the baseball diamond to the picture shown, which is, I think, 15,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet reduction, and turf that as well with synthetic turf. And then the other items remain the same location. And this option is about $8.4 million, and again, an increase of about $5.7 million over that baseline of just the synthetic turf practice field. And the last option, to include everything that we looked at, is everything I just explained, except in the orange highlighted areas. That is treated to be sort of a mulch bark area, so it's not just grass that grows to 3 feet high and mowed once a year. It's not a fallow field. It's kind of manicured, and then through minimal maintenance, it's a sustained area. And then the bigger thing is the expanded parking on the back by the Gordon Gym. It's increased to 350 parking spaces, so it increases a bit of the parking on the campus. So this option, all in, is just about $10.5 million and an increase over that baseline of $7.86 million. So a lot going on, and again, the table a little busy, but just to give you the comparison for the different options. And again, working with the site and all the moving pieces, at least as of this time and date, these are the things that we see coming down the line and wanted to put together for you to present in a 10-year program. So that was kind of fast. Matt, did you want to add anything before we take questions? Or okay. Thumbs up from Matt.
It might
Great.
come up as we progress.
I'm sorry?
I do.
I have one blue card. Can we listen to the one blue card, and then we'll come back to the board? Okay, so let me just take this one. Kim Staley. And just as a reminder, I'm not sure, we have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Exactly 3 minutes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Staley. I'm a parent at Olive Elementary, and I'm the incoming PTA president. I have 2 boys that just finished 2nd and 4th grade, and I'm here to talk about the Novato High 10-year facility plan. And then you just saw 5 options of a facility upgrade for Novato High, costing between $2.69 and $10.55 million, with additional spending anywhere between $0 and $7.86 million. And these upgrades to Novato High sound awesome. I think they sound great. But as a parent at Olive, it makes me very nervous because it makes me doubt that our projects at Olive will be funded at all. With higher projected costs and longer phase 1 timelines, will there be any Measure G funds for us and our programs in phase 2 and phase 3? And please do not misunderstand me. And principal, please do not misunderstand me, is that I want you to fund every single one of these initiatives for Novato High. I would go with the 3C option to do it all. Do the synthetic turf practice field, the 5 tennis courts, the donated junior ROTC marching program, synthetic turf fields for softball, for baseball, and parking, and the mulch landscaping. But I would ask that you would please do these projects after you've completed the projects at Olive. Because you see, at Olive, we're not fighting for turf fields, we're not fighting for tennis courts, we're fighting for the basics. We're fighting for air conditioning, a multi-purpose room that will hold our entire student body, a centrally located office, and security fencing. And these are things that really most schools in Novato already have. And I personally am a huge advocate for air conditioning, that I believe this to be a phase 1, priority 1 type initiative. And I think that tennis courts, turf fields, even performing arts centers are really worthy endeavors, but they are not equal, I would say, to an air conditioning system, which is a health and safety issue for kids. My younger son, Weston, is an 8-year-old, and this Thursday he came home sick with heat stroke. And I sent him 2 bottles of water. I told him to not run at recess, but many of you who know active 8-year-old boys, that's problematic, right? And so he comes home sick because of the heat, and in our year spent in Novato, this isn't the first time. And I just think it's unacceptable that that schools should not make our kids sick, that I should be worrying about 3-digit subtraction. I shouldn't be worrying, do I need to take my son to the hospital to get him rehydrated? And the same price for one 85,000 square foot synthetic turf field is the same price as putting in air conditioning at Olive, at Linwood. And as a reminder, who are the schools that don't have air conditioning? Well, from my opinion, it's the poor schools with ethnic minorities. And that just doesn't seem fair or equitable. So as you plan these task force and policies and procedures around equity, I think that this is a huge opportunity, that by putting Olive ahead, it's really equity in action, and you can do it. That if you please evaluate and reprioritize the Measure G funds, I would put the basic needs of Olive first, and then fund the synthetic fields and the tennis courts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, board members, questions or comments on the presentation that Mike presented? Trustee Mack and then Trustee Miller.
I just got another bunch of detailing questions. Let's first look at option 1, please. And I think some of these are, I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I'm clear and also just kind of clarify for everybody else. So, yeah, thank you. So let's be clear. What happens to the maintenance and operation? Well, it's the maintenance shed there.
The grounds
option
building?
1, or in all the options, really, right?
The grounds building, is that what
Yeah,
you're
the
referring
grounds.
to? Because of the Center for the Sciences building that takes up most of the grounds yard, we need to relocate grounds off of Novato. So in every option, it needs to move.
Okay, so that building to the right of the pink is going to go away.
Correct.
And then what is going to be there? Pavement, asphalt, parking?
I think initially they'll
Courtyard?
probably look to see how far out they could, because I think it'll be an elevation difference with the level of the Center for the Sciences building. Maybe they'll see if they can make a bigger courtyard, because as you recall, the initial design had garage doors in all the classrooms for some outdoor learning. That's an option. They might just, wherever they slope the end of that and then down into the rest of the grade, could be gravel parking, could be just open area. But
So just to be clear, we approved option 3, so that really is effectively going to be on the way out relatively soon.
Correct.
Okay.
That will be tied to the new option at the C Street warehouse.
Okay, and that, whatever we do there is consistent regardless of option here. Okay. And then the irrigated areas surrounding that turf field and the new marching, I mean, right now, those are all irrigated. They're mowed, they're lumpy, they're full of gopher holes and ruts, but they're still irrigated, so it's green. So now we're gonna go in and effectively tear up that whole system. What's gonna happen to the outside of that?
We haven't dove into those details, but my best estimate would be, just like you said, we rip out the old irrigation systems. The new synthetic turf field would have its own perimeter system, just like our football stadium, for cooling capability.
Right.
And we would not replace the green area around those with any other sprinkler system. So it would go brown and dead in the summer and
Waist-high
grow with the
weeds.
rains in the winter, and we would maintain it to keep, meet the county fire hazard.
To be very similar to the area to the southeast corner, which is currently like that.
Yes.
It's just fallow.
Again, we haven't really dove into the details on that, but that would be my guess, because there's no plans to put in any more irrigation to keep it at the level it is now, because it's not going to be used for athletics or practice field or PE classes, because we'd have that second practice turf field there.
And one thing I noticed in all 3 plans is, and you can see it perfectly here, you see that line going between the ROTC and the baseball diamond? That's a very well-used path.
Access from the back road to the
It goes to
campus.
the back entrance off of Washington. Probably a couple hundred kids use it every morning and every afternoon.
I heard from the neighbors how much they like that.
Yeah, I don't know what we want to do long-term, but I think that we probably need to formalize that or abandon and close the entrance, just for safety.
Just to that comment, I know in option 3, B and C, if you put all the athletic fields there.
You have an alley, yeah.
We have estimated a lot of concrete work for ADA access. Might be able to either make that a permanent path if that entrance is deemed to be.
As it is right now, as soon as it rains, it turns into a big muddy bog, and what happens is all the traffic then goes to the front of school because people don't go to the back of school, and then it's just a big mess. So anyway, that's something we all need to consider. Option 2, I'll be done fast, I'm sorry, guys. Option 2, so I'm very appreciative of the donation from the RTC folks. This is awesome. They finally get a home to do what they need to do and what they do with our students. My question is, right now we're kind of effectively just taking over the old tennis courts,
Correct.
the old roller hockey. And one idea at one point was instead to locate them right next to the PAC in the 2 vacant tennis courts. Now, is there a reason why we're not doing that? Because it's too small?
We thought about that, but we're also, again, if you remember the discussions from the Charlotte Collaborative when he came and gave you the district-wide performing arts review.
Right.
For the Novato High campus, he had what he called a phase 2, which was classroom space behind the PAC building to more efficiently put classrooms on the campus.
Being reserved for that.
We thought that was a better adjacency than the marching pavilion over there. Or in the meantime, before that could happen, you could use it as an outdoor scenery yard that's right behind the theater access
That's
to the
kind of where
stage.
my head was going too, okay. But
Right.
when
So those options we thought weighed a little bit more than putting the marching pavilion over there.
Okay, then option 3A. Just going through this.
Trustee Mack, on the subject of the ROTC pavilion, is my understanding of that, that's going to be a multi-use facility for the school. I mean, it's labeled that way, it's kind of set up for them, but it's going to have bleachers, and it's a gathering auditorium slash half covered.
It's like a roof.
Right. So when you're looking at it, you have to think that anyone cheer can use it. I mean, it's going to be available for
Covered pavilion, estimated, I think in the ROTC program paper that they presented, they mentioned about 5,000 square feet. I just did it the same size as the old tennis courts to give you a good size.
It might not actually be that big, but
Right.
what I guess in relation to where it goes, I just think it's important to know that I think every program on site would at one point or another be using it for.
Yeah.
Again, it can be
I agree.
a speaker. You can have presentations there. Larger classrooms can be held in
Covered
it.
area for.
It's gonna be
So it's
bleach-
basically,
yeah.
it's like one of those horse rings with no wall. It
Currently,
might have
as-
cyclone fence
as
on the side for
discussed with,
security.
Bleachers are in it, rock wall
And-
climbing, all kinds of stuff.
And again, back to adjacency, we didn't want to put it too far away from where the current ROTC classrooms are.
Got it, and it's, I assume, asphalt floor or cement.
Probably a poured concrete pad with,
Okay.
because of the structural requirements to do the cover.
Okay, but thank you, that's a good.
Yeah,
point.
I
did-
just,
I
so
forgot it was
everybody, when they
roof.
were considering this, they understood that to be more than the way it's temporary labeled.
Yes,
Probably modular.
absolutely.
Option 3A, so, you know, I'm kind of looking at this. This is kind of doing a lot of stuff, but, you know, obviously a lot of fallow, as before. So basically fallow area. What about the softball field? What happens to that, the old softball field?
In this option, it would be moved and you could grade it to level and leave it as dirt or gravel to maybe do parking. But it wouldn't be striped or anything, you know, paved, but
Or
open
maybe move
space.
ROTC there so it's closer to the classroom, if that's what we decide to do.
Could, it just, we looked at, and that's what I did in the cardboard, because we had these things going all over the place.
Right.
I guess for the, sort of the way the linear orientation of the facilities was, it didn't quite fit as well over there. You could put it, but we also wanted to leave some space for expansion in case a new requirement came in. This
That's
campus
where I was going.
doesn't have much, and we wanted, it has it in little pockets that are on the edge of the property lines. So we wanted to have a more solid area where we could do it. So if it was, say, for classrooms, you wouldn't be on the other end of campus, you'd be adjacent to where
For
we.
what it's worth, I'd like us as a group to do what we can to keep ROTC as close to its classroom as possible.
Yes.
That's kind of
In this
far,
case,
but-
the only reason I think we didn't slide the tennis courts over was concern over the lights that
And,
close to
and
housing.
whatever we do, we need to put paths in. We can't just drop these things in and expect kids to walk out in dirt like they do
Right.
now.
No, and again, the rough estimates included a lot of concrete work for not only
Okay.
ADA access, but also just general accessibility, because like you said, you just don't want to have a cow path out to a field.
Yeah, we have that now, unfortunately. That's part of the reason why now is not acceptable. 3B, and this is my last one.
Oops, went the wrong way, sorry.
Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, my note on 3B was really just the walkway once again. So basically, and also too, the softball field just really looks to me like an expansion space for more campus.
Exactly. Gives you that flexibility.
That's it. But thank you.
Okay. Trustee Millerick?
First question was the ROTC pavilion, and I've heard some comments. First, it's Field Act compliant. Are we just getting a donation or somebody giving us a structure? What's the
As
deal?
I understand, it's a funding donation, not sure if it's a construction donation, but it would be built to DSA standards, as per all of our other facilities on the site.
So, like every other asset that comes to the school district, that then turns into a school asset, not a program asset, and it's going to be used in some broad way to support the whole campus, not just one program.
Correct.
So calling it an ROTC pavilion may work fine for the conversation, but in fact, we might want to call it the, Nakamura Stadium or something, or
pavilion.
yeah, or pavilion, but something
point.
that
Great point.
that makes it clear to everybody that it's not it's not just for the auto shop program or just for the football program. It is a field for a venue for multiple purposes. So that's exciting, actually.
Absolutely. I just did it so you could.
Yeah,
wanted
no, I
to
got you. No, I
donate a part.
appreciate this, and I think it would be useful for all of us to remember that construction maintenance building on that campus goes away. I mean, because of everything we've decided tonight, this is all maybe, but that we've already decided.
Right.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
My big concern is we're sitting here talking about spending, what was the top number for the most fancy one? 8 million?
8.
Yeah, so.
10.5 million.
Yeah, so out of out of our bond measure, that doesn't sound like a lot, but we're gonna end up making choices. It's either gonna be air conditioning at Olive, or it's gonna be this kind of facility, and we're sitting here without, I mean, I appreciate what you've done, but we don't have a landscape architect under contract to kind of work this stuff through. That's what they do professionally. And we don't have a plan for San Marin at all. We don't even have so it sounds to me like, besides pushing stuff around on a table, we're campus. And I think we need to be having the same program conversation at San Marin, even if we don't know where we're going to push the little blocks. We need to be having the comparable conversation at San Marin. I don't think it's fair to half of our community for us to be having this conversation without simultaneously discussing the other high school, even if we're not sure exactly where the blocks go. I think we are in setting ourselves up for a huge catastrophe in this town. We got an election coming up, and I think we might just, serving half the town and not the other half is not an acceptable solution to me. So I'm not prepared to move on any of this without having a similar conversation about San Marin, maybe in more abstract terms, but at least a list of programs. And that's not a comment to you, that's a comment to 6 other people sitting at this table. The other issue, I think, even if we develop a conceptual plan for this all ought to be tabled for 5 years while we go and build out the Olive air conditioning and Linwood air conditioning and some of the performing arts programs that have been promised for the middle schools, because we're going to run out of money. And if we can't seem to discuss the money issue at this table, which I've asked for multiple times, we need to then just prioritize projects and go until we run out of money, because that's really the model we're following, is we're going to spend until there's none left and say, oh, gee, what a surprise, there's no money left. And all of it's going to have no air conditioning, and everybody's going to go, oh, we didn't quite understand that. I think we need to be we need a positive plan, and we need to have it sooner. So I think these are all wonderful. I agree with the presenter from Olive. This is a great opportunity. I don't like bark all over the campus, but that other, but that Novato High's program is improved, I agree with. Not at the expense of Olive's program, or kids going home sick, or kids having heat stroke, or San Marin getting not even a clear definition of what their multipurpose room is yet, or their theater program. I think we got this wrong. So it's a great conversation.
Just remind ourselves, this is just a staff report.
Well,
it's just, we requested this as a board.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah.
I request that we do the San Marin report immediately.
Okay.
You now have a request for staff.
Well,
And
that's
so I
on here.
want this
Staff
board
is
to decide that
working.
we're going to do this.
Staff is working on the San Marin one. It says
They
right
said
here.
it's going to be weeks or months. It's not okay, Debbie.
Okay.
It's not okay.
No, I understand you. I'm just
Okay.
trying to make it clear to people who might be watching that this is just, it's a staff report, and the
It's
board.
just a staff report.
And I respect your opinion, Ross, so don't think that I'm trying to shut you down or anything. Superintendent Hogelboom would like to say it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to note, I think, Ross, is that the reason for the 10-year plan is that not that it's going to be funded right now. There's no way we can fund all these things, but we need to know where things are going to go now, so that in the future, in probably the next bond that's going to come up that would pay for it, where things are going to be. So when we are placing some things, where which would be maybe right now the second athletic turf field, because that was included in the bond, or the marching pavilion because that was donated. So it's not necessarily that we're going to fund all these things and take all the money away from everything else in phase 2. It's just knowing eventually, when this thing gets built out, when we're probably not here, where it's all going to be, so that we don't put something in one place and then go, oh, well, we shouldn't have put that there, because 10 years from now we needed to figure out where the tennis courts are going to be, or where the softball fields are. So again, it's more where things are going to be than it is we're going to fund these things right now.
Okay, so as long as we include the same scope of effort for San Marin, and we do it soon, so we have the same 10-year plan for San Marin, so we don't make the same mistake at San Marin that we don't want to make at Novato, this would be a great conversation. I just don't see us doing that.
I would say the one difference is that the the second turf field, and that we know right now that that's not going to be impacted by lights or anything. And so we can give a guess at it, but San Marin specifically asked us to wait to see how that goes, because they want to see the impact of the lights, because that's going to impact, you know, we had discussions about where we would have a turf field. Should we move the baseball field? Should we put a second athletic turf field, and where would that be? And that is so tied into what impact the lights are going to have on that you can go ahead and do that right now, but it doesn't have the same, I would say, impact on where we're pitting things that we're going to move forward with right now, which is the athletic turf field and the marching pavilion. Those are things we can move ahead on now. There's nothing at San Marin that we need to move ahead on right now that we're asking you for your approval, and that's why this one was brought forth first.
What I think you need us to approve is the scope of programs that are going on the campus. And we are building a long-term scope of effort for Novato High, right here, separate from where we put them. We're talking about a long-term program. And I think it's not up to San Marin High School to decide, principal or teachers, to decide that the community up there doesn't get the same level of services. I think that's a Board of Trustees' job, who represent the community, to say these kinds of programs need to be implemented at San Marin High School. Let's this board, this district, build a plan that describes this kind of program, and then we can build it over time when we have the money. Same argument. Let's build it over time when we have the money. But I don't think it's our business to listen to the high school principal or whoever up there said, don't worry about us, don't plan for our future. I think this board's supposed to be planning for the future. We're going to, you know, this board is responsible for the long-term continuity of this district. Employees come and go.
Could I just chime in? Okay.
I had a question well before this, so Trustee Aguila. And then Trustee Scott is next.
So, well, now that this came up, I have a question. It was my understanding that no matter which of the options we pick for this right now, for Novato High, you know, we're still not, we're not neglecting other schools, and, you know, Olive still gets to have their RC. Is that am I not understanding whether we choose whatever plan we choose tonight? I mean, are we going to be neglecting?
No,
I mean, we want to make sure that we're still, because I agree.
Great question. Right now, this is just a staff report to give you options of where things could go, what we did. The only projects that we know about that are approved are the Phase 1 projects that you all have already approved, of which Olive was not one of those right now. They are.
Okay, that's important to know. Okay.
They will be evaluated when we go to the Phase 2 prioritization.
Right, okay. Yeah, and then, so now back to this options thing, and then we can go back to whatever, to more clarity. But so it seems like 3C, as far as the parking goes,
yes.
It seems like 3C and possibly 3B could take care of the parking. Just
3C is the full paved stripe, the whole 9 yards, and then 3B gives you the space, but it might be rough graded, it might be gravel, it would be open. It's kind of like what they use for extra parking for graduation. You drove in, parked around some cones on a hill. And
but I just wanted to be clear, so 3C and then possibly 3B, depending on what we do with it, correct? Okay, thanks.
Trustee Scott?
Okay, my issue also is around the parking. I mean, we want to be good neighbors, and there is a parking problem out there. When I was there for graduation, they were parked everywhere, blocks and blocks and blocks away. And I get it. Granted, it was graduation, and you have extended family coming. But I'm so glad. Yes, do you know what I was going to say? I mean, it was insanity, and. You know, as programs build, as MSA might grow, as our OTC grows, we're going to have to deal with the parking problem. We're going to need to be good neighbors out there, and I was disappointed that some of the other options didn't dovetail that in. I mean, if we're going to plan out for 10 years, parking's a problem. I don't want it just addressed in the most fanciest thing. For me, I'd like to see the parking addressed in maybe every single option, just because if we're going to grow programs at that campus, we just can't have, we have to try to minimize that if we can. And since we're trying to plan now, I think that that's something that is a priority for me anyway.
Sure, we can go back and it'll be different sized and different locations of parking. For example, for this one, the softball field needs to move,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I mean, I saw other issues
Sure.
where they possibly could go, but
Exactly.
it wasn't being planned for it. So it's like, well, if this is the 10-year plan and we're planning, I think parking for every single one of the plans should be somewhat identified. I mean, I clearly saw through some of the various aerials, well, it could go here, but are we intending it to go here? And I don't know. It's just
No, it's
my
great.
thought process.
Great point. We can go back and add those to each option to try to expand parking as much as we can with whatever that option holds.
Trustee Nell, and then Trustee Mack, and then Trustee Cooper.
So I think it's important to go back and just sort of echo some of what Superintendent Hogaboom brought up and just evaluate where we're at, because we've had some public comment and we've also had a lot of concerns about process, and we are not changing the process. There's no desire to do anything unequitable. Everybody wants to prioritize, and, you know, for example, you could say, well, if, you know, air conditioning here, that means we're not going to have athletic programs here. So, I mean, everything that we're going to do is give and take. And in order to make these difficult decisions, we ask staff to go and give us more, you know, ideas and options. That's why this is called a 10-year plan, because we didn't want to build something in a permanent location that we would find out 2 years later was just a complete waste of money and time and effort. So thank you for helping us by bringing things forward at the speed and level of capacity that you have available to you, and that the rest of this community who is working with you on a regular basis, such as the San Marin community that was mentioned, you know, in their priorities. I think that we're doing okay. Is it perfect? No, but we're trying to listen to everybody and go through all the steps, and there isn't no intention here at all to screw someone else out of something so they can get something for themselves. Believe me, this board, I know you guys all well enough, that won't happen. We're gonna make hard decisions, but they're gonna be based on information, and this is information to me. So far, you know, we asked like turf or grass. We had information at our last meeting that, in my opinion, based on that deficit operating budget that we just looked at and intend to approve, we all have operational deficit spendings. We need to invest in things that aren't going to cost us money to run them. That, in the case of this particular example, we would have to go with turf fields to save on the cost of water, irrigation, labor, everything associated, because what you'll end up with is what we have now. Programs that aren't serviced. The big concern over programs. Well, it is it's dastardly, it's despicable. I cannot believe we let children play on these fields in the condition that they're in right now. We should be ashamed of ourselves. In fact, part of our operational budget showed a dip in our routine maintenance set aside. And it's not going to be until not this fiscal year, but the year after that we're going to put that routine maintenance back up to 3% where it belongs. So I love air conditioning, and I feel horrible when I hear about kids getting heat stroke and everything, but no one is saying anything about not getting to the important projects at every level. What we're trying to make is a decision about an important project in this phase, which is where to put some approved turf and programmatic improvements. And I couldn't make that decision without knowing how it was going to affect everything. So I think we're on the right path here, and I like what's coming forward. I'm hoping that it'll rain money and we'll all be able to solve the problem, but I know that's not going to happen. But there was a discussion around the operating budget earlier about not even having one of these elementary schools. So how are you going to feel spending $2.8 million on an elementary school that we have to close, in my opinion, primarily because of the irresponsible stirs and purs situation, which is $6 million a year, folks. That's why we don't have these problems solved, if we want to get angry or frustrated with something. So I think at this point, let's move on. We've been informed. We've got to make some ideas. I'll make it real easy for you. I like option 3C. And you know why? Because it makes the most sense. It's the right thing to do. It lines everything up. It saves us operationally, takes care of the parking. it serves all the athletic programs there, and I can only imagine that San Marin's going to end up with something similar over a 10-year plan, whether it's this bond or the next one or however we do it. But let's do things correctly the first time and do that service for our public and our citizens and our students in the community. So that's,
Hear, hear.
thank you for the report.
Trustee Mack.
I can't agree more, but I'll let that stand because I thought that was very well put. One thing I want to point out, especially for the elementary projects, we can't put AC in until we finish the campus. It's not a fiduciary. We're not exercising our fiduciary responsibility to do that, because if we put an AC and then we change the campus, then we're changing the AC. The idea was to have the AC put in. Well, correct me, is that correct?
No, you save, when you mobilize once to a site and you do, at Olive, I think there was 4 or 5 big projects we were planning in the master plan. You would save a lot of money by going there once and doing everything at once.
Right,
If
so
you
I just want to
pulled
make
out,
that clear.
An AC, it would.
Going in to do AC tomorrow is not the best use of the money, only because we have so much other construction we plan to do there. Okay, that just want to make that clear. And that's true of Linwood as well, of course.
Right.
And really, and the other schools are planning to do. So, and unfortunately, because the plans to address that campus are not yet prioritized, that's what we got to be focused on first before we do AC. So we got to get our priorities straight. And I totally understand the need to get to that campus as soon as possible. So that's for me, that's what the priority needs to be. Secondly, just in terms of just Measure G projects, I get it, and Ross is absolutely right. We had a list this long, we're ending up a list a lot shorter. And frankly, I don't see the necessity to say that it's either this or AC. There's a whole lot of other projects we haven't even started talking about that we all know are very large ticket projects that aren't even prioritized, and we don't even have people advocating them to us. I'll just throw 2 examples out there. Turf fields at the middle schools. I'll also throw out the Sinaloa gym. Frankly, you talk about equal across town. Why does Sinaloa get a brand new gym? San Jose just gets a little, bump out on their multi-use building. Why not do the same thing at Sinaloa? So I do believe that exercise needs to be done. However, I do think there's plenty of opportunity for us to go through that list and start making those choices that does not cause us to say AC or turf. It instead says both, but addresses other issues. So what I would ask is that we start that exercise sooner rather than later, per Ross's suggestion. Absolutely, as soon as possible, because I think it's just weighing on us. We have to get it done. Lastly, San Marin. I understand what you're saying, equal across town. I totally agree with that. However, this is the way San Marin is playing it. And this is my understanding because I've talked to people there, and what they're thinking is they have a turf field with lights. They've effectively doubled, maybe tripled the capacity of that field because of lights, because of time, right? They do not need another full-blown turf field to run a simultaneous game in soccer or lacrosse. They just don't, because they can go into the night with lights instead. As a result, their plan, they're going to turf the baseball field and just basically chalk it for practice for lacrosse and soccer. But they're going to turf the baseball field. And the end result is you're going to have one campus with lights and a turfed baseball field and a softball field that doesn't want to be turfed because they have 400 volunteers. Well, I'm exaggerating, but plenty of volunteers. And then you're going to have Novato High with a rectangular turf field and a gopher-strewn baseball field and a softball field with a sinkhole. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. So where this is going, it's already going different because of the lights, to Jim's point. The lights are the key issue over there because it expands capacity dramatically. That's all.
My goal is to bring that planning process right in front of us.
I
do the same for San Marin that we're doing here.
I agree. They're being wily about it, to be honest.
I don't care. It's not their job.
They're being wild, but I agree that we need to bring them to, but they're kind of being coy about it. But last but not least, I'm going to steal a page from Shelley's book. We should ask the principal to come up and talk. I mean, which version do you prefer? What do you think? Talk about where we're at now and whether it's acceptable. Sorry.
See, that's the trouble with showing up. You get I'll wait till he's done.
Okay.
Well, it's similar to what I said. First of all, good evening. Thank you for having me here
Good
tonight.
evening.
I think it's similar to what I said last week. The status quo is just not possible. The fields are so horrible, especially the secondary field. So something needs to be done. Obviously, in looking at the cost-benefit analysis that we saw last week from Mike with the excellent work from him and his team, shows that over time, turf makes more sense. We've also shown in my time here that we do not have the capacity from an M&O, an maintenance operations perspective, to service the fields. So even if we were to sod it, what's going to happen to those fields? We're going to be resodding it every 8 to 10 years. So to me, the only real viable option, especially over a 20-year period, is to turf it. So that's where I'm going. The mulch in yellow is new to me. I think I'm open to the concept. I do agree with what everyone's saying about parking, is making sure that we're strategic about where that is and what it looks like, how many spaces we're getting, and that's huge. The Washington Street steps, from a safety perspective, I would like to seal a brick wall there and not have anybody go up those steps. Yeah, it's one of those things where, from a safety perspective, I can't monitor who's coming on and off my campus. And the residents would love to wall it off, as long as they have a key to the wall so they can go use the fields. So it's tough. But it is very complex. I agree with what Trustee Null said and what Trustee Mack said as far as everything that they outlined. One thing, the lights are huge. If you put lights in at a school, it doubles and triples the capacity for practice and for games that we don't have. So we've kept our mouth shut about lights because we know it's not a viable option at Novato High, and I totally get it. But that just means we have to have that auxiliary field. And so I'm just about doing it the right way. And I don't envy you because you have a lot of difficult decisions to make. But I think just the 20 or 30-year scope of the cost-benefit analysis it points to turf. So that's kind of where I stand. And as far as the 10-year plan, I mean, this is critical because everyone is coming at Mike and I about the campus, about, where is this going? Where is that going? What is it going to look like? Especially ROTC, when they come and say they have a generous donor wanting to add to their program. We just need this so that we can say, okay, well, these are some of the plans we have in place, and these are some of the options, so that we look like we have done our research. So, does anybody have any?
Thank you.
I have Trustee Cooper still. Trustee Cooper.
So at this point, I think many things, if not all things, have been said. I appreciate everyone's comments. My preference, let me start off, I think this is an awesome plan. It's a 10-year plan. It's an overview, and here's where we're going to go within those 10 years or whenever. It's not, I appreciate the fact that we're not planning on doing it today, tomorrow, whatever, but we do everybody needs to have a plan like this. If you're building a city, you plan the whole city ahead of time if you're smart. So with that said, my choice would be 3A, B, or C. But with the parking that's included in C, included in B and A. So I like the layout, the way everything's lined up like that. I think it's smart. But I'll leave it at that. I think we've got a lot of other things to do with respect to Measure G. And what Trustee Millerick said, I agree. So that's all I have, really.
Trustee Aguila?
I was just wanting to ask our principal, what was his opinion of the options?
Do we have to? We know.
Yeah.
Option one? No.
Yeah, like I said, the 3C I've never seen before, and it's just the mulch part. I haven't heard of that. I do like is 3B and 3C exactly the same, but just mulch added?
Mulch and park.
Oh, okay. Well, so the parking is huge. I think minimizing, making the baseball field, I think, a little bit more high school friendly. I don't think it needs to be as big as it is currently. So I do like that concept. So, yeah. So I would say 3B or 3C. So 3B with parking added, 3C if people are fans of mulch. So.
All right, yes, trustee Millerick.
So to be clear, I think we need a 10-year plan for every campus, and I would go with 3B on this campus. I don't like mulch. I'd rather save it for parking. But at least we have a plan for one campus. And my issue isn't that this, and oh, by the way, I've driven around Marin County after we took the presentation on turf, and clearly, besides the presentation, everybody's switching to turf. It is clearly the economic model. So I have no issue with the technical answer, and I have no issue with planning. My problem is, why aren't we doing it? Not why aren't we? We need to be doing it for every campus, San Marin at the same time as Novato High, and make sure we understand the budget implications to every other campus. So 3B is my choice in this, for this, and a 10-year plan is my choice.
All right. Again, this was just a staff report, so thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. We look forward to the San Marin one at some
My
point
pleasure.
in the next school
Hope to
year.
bring that back in
Yeah.
August.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, before we conclude this meeting, I want to check with everybody for the meeting for next Tuesday. Right now, we potentially have one closed session item. Wanted to see, it's a lengthy meeting. It's our last meeting of the school year. Can we move the open session up to 6 o'clock and the closed session starting at 5:30?
I can make it work. That will work for me.
Okay? Yeah, explain.
We talked
Trustee,
about this,
a
so
little
just
bit.
so everybody's
Yeah.
aware, I'm flying back from Orange County, arrive at Oakland 4 o'clock, so it might be tight. But
Yeah.
that's okay.
So you're fine coming
Just so you know.
when you get
I'll
here?
definitely make the open session.
Yeah, okay. Okay, trustee Aguilar, were you good with that? Okay, and trustee Scott?
Yeah, so that's just agenda planning then at 4:30?
Potentially, yes, yeah. Okay, so let's, okay, so 6, 5:30. Yeah, we don't need a whole hour beforehand, so 5. Yeah. I think we could do it 5. It's our last meeting, and we won't really have any agendas to plan, just to go over that meeting for that night. Okay, so we have that on record. It's a 6 o'clock start for the regular meeting, for the open session, 5:30 for close. Okay? This meeting's adjourned.